Everybody, what's going on? I'm Rob Cesternino, back here with another edition of one of my favorite podcast series around. It's time for another edition of Ask Dr. Christian Hubicki. And back with us, our great friend here to answer all of your questions about life, science, and pop culture, and even Survivor. It's Dr. Christian Hubicki. Christian, how are you?
Doing wonderfully. Great to be here. I look forward to these, Rob, and I'm so thrilled that when you give the opportunity to come on and chat with you about whatever questions come our way, because people have got a lot of questions.
We've got a lot of questions. I'm glad to be here. So, Christian, this is, I believe, Ask Dr. Hubicki 5. Is that correct?
I think it might be 6.
Might be 6. Oh my God!
I could be wrong. I need to count them all up, but it's that might require 2 hands, and I'm not sure I can manage that level of math. So,
yes, and Christian was just with us a couple of weeks ago for our big podcasters versus players simulation of Brant Steele, and so great to have you back after your big performance.
Yes, I felt really more proud of that than anything else I've ever done in the Survivor community. Was getting
incredible.
I shouldn't spoil the results. I know in case people want to go back and watch, but it was quite an eventful season. I'll say that.
Very eventful. And so, how has your summer been? Eventful as well?
Yeah, pretty eventful. I got to do some travel for conferences now that that's a more normal thing. It's good to see some people I haven't seen in a couple of years around work conferences, and my vacation's coming up in August, all before the semester starts up woefully too soon. I say woefully, but it'll be good to see all the students again.
Yeah. Okay. That's how I feel about the fall reality season of it. It's like time for me to get back in the classroom.
Well, this is going to be an overloaded semester for you coming up in the fall.
It's going to be a very busy semester. Yes. I'm teaching many classes coming up this fall. So we'll be certainly talking a lot about that coming up. But Christian, I appreciate you making the time to do this. I know you have a big deadline next week. So thank you for taking some time out of your schedule to answer questions from the listeners of Rob as a Podcast.
My pleasure. My pleasure. This will be exactly the energy boost I need to carry me through the end of it. And, I will say, every time I talk with you about this, the questions really get me thinking sometimes in a different way about stuff I've been doing before, the way I think about some of these topics. So when I have to sort of formulate an answer, it really gets me to reframe my thinking. So I enjoy the opportunity.
Okay. So let's start to dive into these questions. I guess maybe, let me see. I'd love to find a way to get into this, but I was hoping that we could talk a little bit about everything. I feel like there's so many advancements in AI every time that we talk that I don't know if there's an ideal question to jump into this, but go ahead.
No, I mean we can just jump straight in. I think there's a question about actually from Ryan Gardner right there. This might be something related to this.
All right. So Ryan Gardner says, do you foresee AI being utilized by the Survivor production team in creating new twists for the show, going into ChatGPT and prompting ideas related to Survivor, and then fleshing the good ideas into potentially full-blown concepts?
Okay, so good question, Ryan, and I feel it's a good jumping point into a lot of the AI stuff that's been going on, and we can talk about it. And we talked about this a couple of times in our previous Ask Dr. Hubicki's. We talked a little ChatGPT, Dolly Mini, where you generated probably the best image ever made, which I believe was a Paul Rubin sandwich. That was a memorable experience. I'm not sure I'll forget. But yeah, now it's the subject of all kinds of stuff, because right now we're in July of 2023. AI topics are becoming relevant to writers' strike issues, actor issues, like the writer strikes going on right now, the SAG strike going on. People are concerned about AI taking their jobs, and I feel like a couple times we talked about these approaches, we kind of zeroed in on one particular method, and I sort of would talk about what it can do and what it can't do, and we'll do a little bit of that here. But like a lot of times we focus a little bit on the scary dangers of it, like the idea of trusting Chat GPT for really important stuff when it doesn't really understand important stuff. Like very recently, there was a big court case. Um, where there was a court case, it wasn't a big court case, where the lawyers tried to use Chat GPT
Yeah.
to craft their legal arguments. I wonder if this got covered in News AM.
Yeah, it actually did.
Yeah.
And ChatGPT was just making up like cases that it was citing.
That's
ChatGPT is a
exactly
liar, right?
I'd said it was a BSer. That's not my particular take on it. And especially when it comes to things like citations, it's really has struggles with, and because it just kind of generates text that looks right, or that seems has sort of the gestalt, the form of a good answer. But that doesn't mean it's useless. So I feel like in the past I've talked about all things that you should be careful of, and so everyone, just full disclaimer, do not use it for your legal arguments. Do not use it to write research papers. It will make things up. It really doesn't understand what's going on. But one thing that it is actually kind of interesting as a useful thing is sort of a jumping off point. Like I know that you told me about how you'll use ChatGPT to write your kids like bedtime stories and stuff, right? And like it's a kind of a good creative jumping off point. And I was actually talking of, and that's what this subject of this question is like. Could you use it to come up with creative ideas? And actually, that's a pretty good use for ChatGPT, to my understanding, and something that's being actively studied. I was recently at a conference of AI researchers, and I was just, and one of the things one of the researchers was talking about is they were actively studying whether or not like getting a prompt, like a writing prompt, giving it to Chat GPT and then you bouncing off of that is good for the creative process. And so far, preliminarily, the data was positive that, that if, let's say I needed to write a persuasive essay on something. It's like, Chat GPT, give me 5 ideas for an essay, right? And it spits a bunch of it. It's great for brainstorming, and they can spit a bunch of ideas out at you. No bad ideas in brainstorming, and you take whatever one's best and you run with it. So it's kind of like that. It could be that spark of a creative drive. That's
Yeah.
a good use of ChatGPT, in my opinion.
I find myself that I have a easier time rewriting than writing. And so I do find that something like a Chat GPT can help with like getting sort of like a skeleton of something started. And then, okay, I'm going to say this a lot differently, or go ahead and like completely like rearrange or just jump off of what it's doing. In terms of would it be good for coming up with survivor twists? My suspicion is a hard no.
I think that,
But would it be worse than?
I mean, would I? Here's the thing: would I trust it if I said, "Come up with one survivor twist," and put that on the show? Absolutely not. No. Do not do that.
Should we do it? Come up
Let's do
with
it.
one incredible survivor or twist for the game of Survivor that will be implemented into the next season. It needs to be really good. Okay.
So, make it count. Make it count.
Yeah.
That way it
Don't
really
just
knows.
like spitball ChatGPT. All right. All right. Are you ready? Are you sitting down? All right.
I'm fully seated and prepared for
And then maybe it knew that we
twist.
were doing and it comes with a long note here. Okay. Maybe they knew that we were doing this podcast. It's called The Time Traveler's Idol. Okay. Interesting. Interesting.
Let's go with it.
Okay.
All right, let's go.
The Time Traveler's Idol is a new type of hidden immunity idol that has the power to alter past events in the game, making it the most powerful item to ever be introduced in Survivor.
Okay.
Okay. So you find the idol, it's hidden just like a regular hidden immunity idol. However, the twist is that there's only one for the whole season. So clues to its location are provided in cryptic ways throughout the game. Okay. If you find the Time Traveler's Idol, it has the power to change one tribal council's outcome from the past. This can be used to change a vote out, thereby bringing back a previously voted off player. Alternatively, it could be used to change an immunity win or a reward win, The decision could be
Of course,
strategic, as it has
of
the
course.
potential to completely change the dynamics of the game. It can only be used once, and it can only change an event that occurred after the idol was found. All right, that's big. It
That's a
can
big
only
caveat. You can't go
change
back.
an event that occurred after the idol was found. The power expires when the game gets down to the final five. The player should announce at the beginning of the tribal council that they intend to use the time traveler's idol.
Well,
Thoughts?
this is funny. This is funny on multiple levels, and exactly what I mean. One, are we going to discuss the hourglass in the room here?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this is not a particular, but like when it comes to this, but like you can jump off that format. Like, would you want to change a past event? And clearly, Survivor went with something not too dissimilar from this in a very limited way. It changed. There was a
Yeah.
twist where they changed the outcome of an immunity win. Now, possibly ChatGPT was trained on information that was based upon. It's possible it was trained on information knowing that the hourglass twist happened, and maybe one of the reasons they came up with that.
I
But
don't
like,
think it was, because it says that its training data goes through September of 2021, which predates the
oh,
Hourglass's introduction in November of 2021.
unless it was reading Inside Survivor, yeah, I don't think it
Yes,
would have
that's
known at
true.
that
That's
point. That's
true.
right. So, but yeah, but like the idea would be like, hey, give me 10 short blurbs. And then you'd go through them. It's like, no, no, no. But then you grab onto one of them. You're like, okay, that little kernel of a twist, that might be
Hmm.
something interesting. And I think that that is some way that it, in any creative capacity, could be useful. Again, it needs to be studied, I think, because sometimes it's possible you might over rely on chat gpt, like in terms of coming up with ideas from scratch. But if you're stuck, I mean, I think that that is a reasonable way to come up with some ideas. So
Hmm.
that's where I would take it with it, because I kind of wanted to highlight something that would be a reasonably interesting way to use chat gpt. I mean, there is also a question about deep fakes. We could talk about that now, or we could talk about that later. I
Please,
mean, yeah,
let's deep fake away.
I mean, because this is sort of the other side of the coin right now. I believe if you go all the way down to a question by, I'm assuming I put it in here. Let's see. Maybe I didn't put it in here.
Oh wait, no.
Um,
Nick M.
yeah,
How
yeah, Nick
concerned are you
M.
by the increasing quantity of deepfake videos, and do you see them having a big impact on society? Do you have any tips on identifying the fakes as their quality continues to improve and they're becoming worryingly realistic?
I mean, and this is something that does worry me, is something like deep fakes. And thanks for the question, Nick M. That's a great one. Especially considering we're now entering a political election cycle for those living under rocks.
Hmm.
It was always a concern in the last election cycle. This would be a big deal, but because if but I think that I am worried, in short, about deep fakes, and it's a general worry, and I can see the obvious ways where things can go awry. I think I've been somewhat heartened that people have been aware of deep fakes for the most part. That I don't know to what degree people have learned a thing about a candidate and assumed it's true based on a deep fake yet, or from a really important political figure. I think one of the most famous. Did you see the Tom Cruise deep fakes from like a year
Yes.
or so
Tom
ago?
Cruise is very anti deep fake also.
I wouldn't be surprised by that, because that actually it's a quality deep fake. But
Hmm.
it does concern me about misinformation getting out there. That is a real concern. And I think that the key here is, what do you do to help yourself when it comes to these deep fakes? Because these deep fakes are going to be out there. Hopefully, these internet platforms will do the best they can to detect them and then mark them as deep fakes as quickly as you can, before it goes too far. But you can't assume they're going to always get it right. And there are ways to literally look at a thing and maybe detect a deep fake. Normally, the faces are the places where, in a deep fake video, where you see things kind of distorted, the forehead's not quite wrinkly enough or too wrinkly. Sometimes the lighting is strange,
Hmm.
but those are things that might change in
Yeah.
whatever next generation of deep fakes can happen. So there's one fundamental trick that that's good against misinformation. I think that it's really got to stick to, which is, if there's something that you see that makes you feel super strongly about, particularly if it makes you really mad, take a step back and ask, Is this actually true? Because these things are typically targeted in a way to inflame your emotions, to make you feel a way. So if you train yourself in that way, like, okay, maybe this is fake, go search from larger news sites, go search different sites, go search sites from, that would support or be against this particular person and see if they are actually covering it.
Hmm.
That's at least one step that you can take to protect yourself from deep fakes, is just being skeptical about
Yeah.
things that want to tell you what you want to hear.
Right. I mean, I don't know. Am I crazy to think that maybe like the deep fake thing is maybe being overestimated? Where that I feel like that, everybody is so polarized about things that if there is something unsavory about the person, your preferred person, you're just gonna talk yourself into like, it's fake, it's fake, that's fake, that's fake. And if it's about a person you don't like, oh my god, that's real, that's real. And like I almost feel like that they could, deep fake just about anything. The people that like you will think it's fake, and then the people that don't like you will believe it.
Yeah, I mean I guess I mean it's hard for me to get numbers on on how true that is. That'll be an idea. That's something a psychologist could study. Would be the effect of there being a deep fake, say, video, as opposed to just a
Hmm.
news article, right? You read a headline, and that headline is probably designed to make you feel an emotion in some way, right? And is that enhanced by the fact that there is a deep fake video attached? I mean, because I'm imagining with a video, you might be able to hit different platforms in a way where there's misinformation.
Hmm.
They're scrolling through TikTok and you see a deep fake. I'm assuming this is what a TikToker does. They do this. But
Yes, yes.
okay, thank you. I got that right. That's what children tell me. And so you can see it just in an instant that this is a thing, and on its face might seem harder to fake, and maybe psychologically that would stick in as being more persuasive. I think that
Hmm.
it's easy to get cynical about misinformation, that everyone will just believe what they want to believe anyway. But I think that there is something to be said when the vector for misinformation becomes more potent.
Hmm.
And but I am, when you're saying that, could it be overblown? I actually was shocked in 2020 that there wasn't some massive boon of deep fakes of political candidates doing things. I was really surprised. So it's possible this thing doesn't materialize. Maybe it gets stamped out at the platform level. Maybe people are just know to be wise, that sort of thing, and are just used to saying deep fake, deep fake, deep fake in the comments. Who
Hmm.
knows? But
Yeah.
but it is something I'm concerned about.
Christian, what did you think about the deep fake Indiana Jones? Did you see Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny?
I did not see the movie, but I saw some clips. I mean, when they I don't remember much about that one. I'm trying to go back to other ones that I did see. Did you see it, Rob? Did you see the
Oh
Dial?
yeah, yeah, I did. I
Was
really
deep
liked it.
faking good?
I
Okay,
thought
okay,
it
okay.
was actually visually very good, and then they like take the bag off of Indy's head. This is like the first 5 minutes of the movie, and then it's like, oh, okay, and it's me, Indy. Like, oh, they
This
didn't
is
deep fake the voice.
the voice. Yeah, I mean, I think that in those,
I've been smoking a lot since the Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
I mean, they do a lot in a movie. I mean, they can pay attention to all the little details, right? And they can say, that thing doesn't look right. Even then, like I think I saw, for instance, the Mark Hamill
Hmm.
in spoilers. He shows up in a Star Wars show at some point as
Yeah.
young Mark Hamill, and and you could tell that they tried to like cut away from him as much as they could and not really show him. But like at times I'm impressed, and at times I can kind of tell. So I don't know. Maybe really that. Like I was impressed by like The Irishman. When I saw The
Hmm.
Irishman, that was a couple years ago now.
Yeah.
And I thought they did a pretty decent job.
Yeah. Okay. And now they have the new aging filter on TikTok that a lot of people are playing with.
It's impossible for me. I can catch up, keep up with these things
That's what the
apparently.
TikTokers are doing. They're swiping
They're
to get look older.
okay. Well, happy to trade with them. I'll take the young filter. That's cool.
Yeah. Okay. How about this? Let's take a question from, I'm sure we'll come back to more artificial intelligence, but we have a question from somebody who is working with NASA. Okay. There's a young man, Carson Garrett, wants to know if given the opportunity, would Dr. Hubicki go to space? Why or why not? Is there any specific robotic research Dr. Hubicki would want to observe firsthand up in space?
Well, Carson Garrett, that's like a good survivor name. I don't think there's been a survivor Carson, so I think
Mhm.
that they should apply. I think that so cool, great question, Carson. And it's great to hear from someone from NASA. Yeah, would I want to go to space? Yeah, I want to go to space. Um, it's not like my life's goal to go to space. I know some people whose it is, but like given the opportunity to go to space, I would be highly predisposed to go. For the adventure of it, to experience the weightlessness, just experience the I mean, I went on Survivor for goodness sake. I mean, just because, but just that experience alone would be interesting. I think that I'd have slight questions about safety,
Yep.
because as much as space travel comes across as routine, we have had some catastrophic accidents, and there have not been that many successful missions, not that many. So looking at the general success rate of sending people back and forth in space, I mean, you're talking about 99% likely you'll come back. I mean, it's pretty good.
Mhm.
It's pretty good. I think it's something about the odds. And now, but
Never
it'll
tell
be a
me the
risk.
odds.
That's good. So that was the de-aged Harrison Ford who said that. I can tell by the voice. The And in terms of the robotics research, I mean, there's NASA does wonderful robotics research. I mean, clearly, I mean, they're probably have some of the most famous robots in the world. Um, they actually have a documentary. I would say a documentary. There's sort of a dramatization about the Opportunity rover called Goodnight Oppie that came out on Amazon.
Oppenheimer?
Oppenheimer. We'll get to Oppenheimer in a bit. We'll table that for a digitally de-aged Robert Oppenheimer. But um,
Mhm.
but when it comes to space robotics, I mean, they have their Mars rovers. They have all kinds of nifty experimental robots that go into space. For instance, there is the Robonaut, famously, which was basically an upper body humanoid robot designed to help do spaceship repairs.
Mhm.
It didn't have legs, but it had arms. It looked like a dude in the spacesuit, or and with sort of a bronze mask. And the kind of research I like to do is locomotion. So robots trying to get around. So robots with legs, sometimes with wheels, sometimes flying around. And so I would love to witness a robotic rover up close, like on the moon, for instance. Um, just that's from a research standpoint is really interesting because lunar dust, which is called regolith, it's really interesting and complicated stuff. When you talk to some NASA scientists about regolith, and it's like imagine sand. Sand really sucks. You don't want to get that in on you. You don't want to get that in your car. It's not
Mhm.
fun. But the thing about sand has been weathered down from rocks that were oddly shaped into little, almost spherical-ish pebbles. Okay, so like they're not perfectly spherical, but they're largely round. In on the moon, there's no water or really any air to weather down all the little shards of rocks. So basically, they're like little daggers.
Oh.
Okay. Oh yeah, they're like really sharp. And anyone who has to design a lunar rover has to really tightly seal and highly engineer the vehicle to not get regolith stuck in places because it's going to wear down your vehicle super quick. And it also it behaves differently when you step on it. So like you might notice that people have talked about how on the moon the astronauts' footprints are like when they step around, they'll step on the moon and the footprint will still be there. Okay, after it's not like sand; it'll kind of like just collapse in a bit if you're on the beach. Only if the sand was wet would it leave a footprint behind. But because the regolith, the lunar dust, is so sharp, it'll interlock in weird ways, and so will stick together and keep the same shape, even though it's not wet. So
Hmm.
when it comes to robots getting around, it creates all kinds of weird, wacky effects. So scientists will actually test their robots on lunar regolith simulant fields. There's actually one here in Florida that you can rent a day at the lunar regolith field where they have fake lunar regolith to try out their vehicles. It sounds like a fun time, some fun place to take the kids. And
Yes, yes.
and so anyway, so I would love to see like a lunar mission for a robot up close and watch that and see how that goes. That would be the fun one.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. I did not know anything about the regolith, and I've watched 3 seasons of For All Mankind.
Oh, I gotta get that, Rob. Rob, it's gonna go on my list as soon as this deadline, summer deadline is over. I
Okay,
gotta watch that show. You've
all
watched it,
right.
yeah.
I've
So,
been trying to get
and
you to watch it for a year, but
I I know, and I've been so bad.
look, you're
Um,
busy. I know, but
yeah,
it's still a good one. But no, I
it's a
never knew
real
that about the lunar surface.
No, it's super crazy. I mean, like I also have an affinity for that stuff because I spent part of my postdoc in a physics laboratory that studied the physics of what we call granular materials, which is basically sand. And I was trying to study how robots would walk on sand. Ironically, when I was about to go on Survivor of all places,
Hmm.
and it, the and or there was plenty of that. I can speak firsthand how much it sucks walking on sand your whole existence. And and when it comes to the ways that you have, it's such a weird material in that, like when sand, it is just a bunch of rocks. But if you take sand and put it in your hand and then you open your fingers, it flows through your hand like a liquid. So it behaves like a liquid in some cases, even though it's very clearly a solid. And if you take sand and grasp it in your hand, it behaves like a whole solid, right? And so I was talking with this NASA scientist one time about he was talking about regolith, and I was like, "Oh, granular materials." And I said, "I remember my time making a robot arm punch poppy seeds." And he was like, "You have to explain what that means to me. I won't let that comment slide without you telling me the story." And I was like, "Yeah." And so at this lab, I would study the physics of sand by taking a bunch of poppy seeds and punching a robot arm into it over and over and over and over and over again with force sensors on it, collecting data. We'd use poppy seeds because if instead of sand, because if sand gets stuck in your robot, that's bad news for your robot. It's going to grind your gears literally. Bad things happen. Whereas poppy seeds, it it just grinds into dust if it gets stuck in your gears. So I
Yeah, but
spent
sometimes the robots fail a drug test after
uh,
then.
that leads, or I had to order at one point 700 pounds of poppy seeds, and that may have flagged some kind of federal agency for this experiment. But I'll say I never want to smell a poppy seed ever again after those experimental days. But,
Okay.
but anyway, scientists have funny stories, and like and on top of it all, like the whole rigmarole was crazy, Rob. Like I would have this big robot arm that was bolted to a wall. It was like an industrial robot arm, like the one that would like assemble a car. And those things are strong, and it would just punch a box of poppy seeds. It would back out, and you have this little indentation of poppy seeds, and you want to reset it back to like a normal setting because it's all punched and compressed. So you want to do another test, you have to reset it. So what you do is you take a blower and you blow air underneath into the box, and it all sort of like slosh up like a liquid, and it's like full sloshing around, and then it would just settle down into a flat surface again, and then boom, and then it would pop. They punch it again over and over and over for like 24 hours at a time. It's an interesting part of my life.
Christian, you mentioned about how the success ratio for the NASA missions could be better.
Yes.
All right, let's take a question from Teeny, who wants to talk about uh, Rob and Christian. Huge fan of you both. I'd like to know Christian's theories about what exactly happened to the submersible and why it happened. I can imagine he has a lot of information or research on this. Thank you.
Yeah. So the submersible. So one, there's a lot of people really investigating in a serious way what happened to the submersible, and we'll find out there will be some reports that really dive into the details of which many of which I wouldn't be aware of. So I just got to sort of give that a disclaimer that I'm not a sub expert. I'm not James Cameron or anything.
Mhm.
But it is an interesting story. And a very sad story, but it does get me talking about something I don't talk about enough on this podcast with you, which is materials. It's actually one of the more interesting sciences that people don't think a lot about, but is very much part of their daily lives, the science of materials. And I got to dust off all my old knowledge from college and grad school, where I took like fracture mechanics and
Hmm.
those kinds of classes in engineering school. Um, but yeah, for those who somehow missed this story, I mean, there was a submersible going down to the Titanic, these tourists, and even the CEO of the company, and then the sub imploded. It was a really tragic thing. And somewhat famously now, this sub was built in an unusual way, not to the typical standards for people who do deep sea submersibles. Okay. And this one of the key ones was the materials, the thing we're talking about right now. Normal subs are built out of like steel, like stainless steel, and a metal. And that's if you want to make these, and the difference between a sub and a submersible is that a submersible isn't really self-propelled. It doesn't have like a bunch of like those little torpedo-y things, little propellers, so it can
Hmm.
drive around. It just kind of just submerges and comes back up. That's what a submersible does, as opposed to a submarine, which can zip around. And and so normal submersibles are built out of metal. And a lot of the experts would say, yeah, we do that because because metals are very predictable. We know exactly how they behave under different circumstances. They're extremely well studied. Whereas this particular submersible by this company was made primarily out of carbon fiber. And carbon fiber is a super cool material. We use it all the time in our robots. It's basically a bunch of strings made of carbon, and which are basically glued together effectively with glue, or really resin, but basically a bunch of strings glued together. What that really is very strong when you pull on it in tension. You're really like stretching it, right? As you would like a string is hard to pull apart just by stretching it a lot. But
Hmm.
it's not as good in compression. You try to take a string and sort of like push toward the other string. It's not going to resist you very much. So it's much stronger when you're pulling on it than when you're pushing on it. And the way that the load on a submersible is such that the pressures are just enormous on the outside, crushing it in. Okay. Um, if a submersible, that if it were the opposite, where if it had a huge pressure pushing out, like you're trying to blow it up like a balloon, okay, carbon fiber would probably be a much better material, because that carbon fiber is going to stretch out like a
Hmm.
hoop. It's actually called hoop stress, this idea. And so and it's really strong because then you're stretching the strings in the way that they're really strong. Um, but this is being compressed in the opposite way. It's actually being compressed from the outside, so it's going to try to crush it. So people have long said that, hey, it's not as good in this material. It's not as good to do a carbon fiber sub. Presumably, he did it for a couple of reasons. One, it can be stronger per the weight; it'll be less heavy, and they thought they could make the walls thinner of it using carbon fiber, and therefore they could fit more people inside. There's a lot of engineering reasons that people go into. Uh, so in theory, it would be nice if you could do it with carbon fiber. And so obviously it didn't work out, and we'll know whether or not whether it was literally the carbon fiber was the problem. It also could have been something like the fact that the window was, wasn't rated for high enough. Perhaps the window cracked. There was a titanium part that was meshing up against the carbon fiber. That could be a problem too. There are a lot of things that could be a problem. But the point being is that not only is that carbon fiber not only is not rated as well to compress as opposed to stretch, it's also just such a newer material that, unlike metals, is a little harder to understand how it's going to work over time. Okay, metals have all kinds of cool properties, and you can spend an entire lifetime just studying how metals behave. Um, and for instance, and it's not always as simple as something like the metal moves until it breaks. You bend it until it breaks. It's very complicated. I actually have here a demonstration, a
Oh.
paper clip. I busted out all the stops for this. A paper clip. It's made out of galvanized steel. This dude right here. Okay. All right. I'll use a colored one. It'll pop out. Same effect here. Right. Okay. Now a paper clip, is made out of steel. Okay. Which means that if I take it and I sort of started plucking it like this here, okay,
Okay.
not really stretching it. I'm just plucking it. It'll keep coming back to the same shape over and over again because I'm not bending it very much. Okay. This is the normal, we call this the elastic part of how it moves. It's hard to tell. It's probably really tiny here. So imagine you're twanging the paperclip there. Boom.
Okay.
I'll do it like here. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's always coming back to where it started, right? That's because I'm not bending it very much. But then if I bend it more, then we're coming back. All right. I bent it more. I surpassed it's what we call the yield strength of that material, right? We know these things about metals. So like if you pass a yield strength, that means I have done stuff to this paper clip that actually can't be undone, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it will never bend. It'll never bend back without me physically bending it back. I can keep bending it back over and over and over and over. And we all know what happens with a paper clip, that eventually you do it enough times, the thing snaps, right?
Right.
So that's because this is called work hardening. All right. And so we know that if we take a metal sub, right, and we know we don't push it beyond its yield strength, we know we can do lots of things over and over and over again with that sub. It's not as well understood how carbon fiber does that, and that's what a lot of people, not the least of which, other than engineers, was James Cameron. And I mean, I joked about him before, but like I listened to some interviews with the guy, and he was talking about material science. And I was like, you know what? He kind of knows some. He does a good job. He did his homework.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently, how it was involved with the design of his own submersibles to go down to the Titanic and then film them, right? So there are all these known properties, and he was saying the same thing I'm saying, which is that there are all these known properties of metals that are so much more complicated and they get and less well understood than carbon fiber. Like for carbon fiber, if I sort of bend a thing made of carbon fiber, what's the guarantee that the fiber itself won't fray a little bit on the inside? And if you do that, that affects the integrity of potentially the entire sub. And so you could be taking a risk where one isn't necessary with the carbon fiber. So anyway, I just want to talk a little bit about materials and all the cool things that you can learn about materials that people don't think about. And I think this is one of the cooler ways to talk about it, is this, sadly tragic,
Yeah.
but very interesting story.
Had the submersible made any missions to the Titanic previously?
It had, yes, and I think that's another thing, is that because it had made previous trips, you might assume, hey, it is clearly strong enough because it made a trip. However, just because there are certain properties of metals that you can do once and it'll be fine, but if you do over and over again, it can eventually weaken it. There's something called fatigue. It's literally called fatigue. It's what in metals. And that's well understood. There's fatigue curves. It's why a lot of things that in machining need to be made out of steel. Like if you have a thing in a factory that's turning a bunch of times or being loaded a bunch of times, make it out of steel because it's got a good fatigue life. Whereas aluminum doesn't. Aluminum will break, will fatigue much quicker. And it's even worse potentially with carbon fiber, because if you load it up once in a way that sort of that will actually cause some of those the fibers to fray, for instance, that can make the whole thing weaker. I mean, imagine you are being hung from a bunch of strings, like you're a trapeze artist or something like that, or maybe like some theater person who's being thrown around on wires and maybe held by 4 wires. You cut one of those strings, all of a sudden the whole thing is much weaker. And in a way, that's how carbon fiber can weaken. So it's possible that because it had made previous dives, it was actually weaker on future times.
Okay. Thank you for taking us through all that. I actually had not known any of that. So that was super interesting to learn about. Okay. I have an anonymous question for you, Christian. Did you do something unique to get you remembered in your Survivor audition tape?
So I'm not sure I talked about with my Survivor audition tape with you at all, Rob. At any of our times we talked together. I mean, I definitely talked about how I applied and got on the show, but like my Survivor audition tape stories kind of like still, it's almost laughable. I somehow had gotten really bad advice in my head as to how to apply for Survivor for years. I got in my head that they didn't care whether or not you cared about Survivor. I think this might have been from like the era of when they, like in the 20s, when they only recruited actors, for the show. They're like, oh, okay, they clearly don't care if you know about the show, so don't even bother talking about the show. And times had changed since then when I got on season later, about 5 or so years later. So I did my first audition tape, and the first thing I said, and it was very straightforward. I said, "Hi, my name is Christian Hubicki. I'm a robotics research scientist, and I want to be on Survivor." And I cut to a video of me with my humanoid robot walking on a treadmill. Me next to the robot is like, this is the robots that I work with. They're the size of people, and I'm explaining. And so, I think that, and I was like, okay, well, at least it's a strong lead. It's actually, and so it was like, okay, I'm a real robotics engineer. I'm a postdoc and who works in robotics. This is what I do. And so I had me with a walking robot. And so that's basically what I had. And it's funny, I submitted that audition tape, and I got a call the next day from a casting director, and they said, like, and they're like, Christian, I really love your videos. Like, I really really like you. I want to, I think you make you good on the show. I love the first like 5 seconds of your video. It's great. I need you to redo it. Need you to redo everything else.
Yeah.
And it's because I didn't talk. It's like, one, you didn't talk about the show. I was like, yeah, I thought that was what it's supposed to do. It's like, no, you got to talk about the show. I was like, all right. And basically, they gave me pointers as to like what to talk about, and or at least what kind of things that they're looking for. And I was like, because otherwise I had no idea. So basically, I got cast because of like the first 5 seconds of my video. The rest of it did not seem to matter.
Well,
too
it's a
much to
great
them.
prop to have a humanoid life-size robot. That's very
Yeah.
attention grabbing.
It is, and I think that in addition, I think just my energy was good in that first 5 seconds. But yeah, the humanoid robot at the end, yeah, exactly. So, and really, that's all it was. But I think that my gimmick was the humanoid robot. But I think the fact it was strong enough that it didn't matter everything else that I did wrong thereafter. And so, and it was funny. Like they gave me some notes. It's like, because they're trying to get material to be able to pitch you to be a potential cast member on the show. That's what they're looking for. And so, and they were like, he came off a little stiff, and that's true, because I did my video and I was concerned that if I ever said
bad that you were next to a robot and they were like, "You're stiff."
yeah, it's not a high compliment, for I gotta say, and so they say you're a little stiff. Take a shot of tequila next time before you record your video. That's the advice I got. I was like, okay. So I did my video in the Georgia Tech physics library the first time. I was like, okay, I need to reshoot a lot of stuff, me talking to the camera. And the reason I was so stiff was because I was so concerned if I ever said the word they would be like, this guy is not ready for television. He doesn't know how to speak on camera. He can't say at any point. So I was like doing takes multiple times and stuff. And so I have to go recreate the shot from me in the physics library, but I go at like 5 a.m. and I go to but on the way there, I stop at a gas station to grab a 6-pack of beer. So that way I could be loose enough to do these shots, to do all these takes and not be as stiff. And it was a horrible failure. I drank a beer. I tried doing it. I was so nervous that I was drinking a beer in a physics library that I was like, okay, I'll come back later.
5 o'clock in the morning. Like, what happened to Dr. Hubicki?
Yes, and that's there'd be some concerns as my mental well-being. So I decided to come back, at 10:30 p.m. when I was safely assumed no one else would be there at the physics library, and so I did takes until about 2 a.m. I finished off all the rest of these beers. They didn't work. It was a terrible idea. Basically, I just got so tired that I just didn't give a crap anymore. And I just like, okay, this is the take. And I think it came off actually more natural because I was less guarded. But yeah, that was my casting story. All started with me, with the robot got me in the door.
Yeah, I don't think I heard that story before.
Yeah, I tried to keep a couple in the kitty for you, Rob, for future appearances.
Yes.
So yeah. So yeah, don't tell the facilities management people at Georgia Tech. That's all I ask.
We won't. And also, like, maybe like 4 hours of like doing the same thing over and over again and being just like completely exasperated is like good practice of what we're gonna see from you on Survivor.
Yeah, that's honestly probably true. I mean, they do break you down in that casting process, and I mean, they are. I mean, I remember vividly in the casting process. I listened to your interview with Ken Raskoff. Is that his
Yes,
name?
yes.
Yes, that was a really interesting interview that you gave because I knew nothing about the casting process. What they were looking for or anything. You're talking to a real live casting person about the kind of things that they talked about, and he said, the one thing we look for that I can say is authenticity. And so they do their best to make sure that you're not putting up a front, and that because if you are putting up a front in front of us in casting, odds are that's going to come crumbling down under the stresses of the island.
Hmm. For sure. Yeah. That they are looking for like authentic characters. I know people said, okay, Carolyn, is she really like this? And it's like, if she wasn't, then, you couldn't be, act as Carolyn for, an entire season of Survivor.
Perfect example. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I see that we have a question here from Jim Crumley. He wants to know any thoughts on the recent results showing a gravitational wave background from the LIGO project. What is the LIGO project?
Oh, this is so cool. And I had to go back to make sure I didn't talk about this before with you, Rob, because this is probably one of my favorite scientific endeavor in all of science and engineering. Is the LIGO project. And it all comes down to this idea of gravitational waves. And this was in the news recently. And this is a bit of an explainer, to prepare yourselves. But have you heard? So have you heard of gravitational waves before, Rob? Is this
I
something
have
that's
not.
crossed you? So it is actually the last great prediction of one Albert Einstein, was that if general relativity is true, this idea that space and time are one thing and they are things that warp and result as a result of mass, like the idea that two objects will go toward each other because they are warping space-time and they will sort of like bend toward each other. That's one of the key insights of Einstein's general relativity. And
Hmm.
that so and as a result, he said, if that's true, then if you had two objects, for instance, two really big objects, okay, and let's say they were orbiting each other, just sort of chasing each other's around like a dog chasing its tail. If they
Okay.
were really big, then the way that these big massive things would warp time, space and time, they would travel around the universe like waves, like ripples in a pond. Okay, if what Einstein say is true. Now the problem is that it's really hard to detect these things if they exist, because gravity is actually quite weak. We don't think of necessarily as quite weak when it might drag our planes out of the sky or whatever. But in reality, if you think about it, this mug, right? The entire force of gravity from the planet Earth is pulling it down, and my somewhat muscular arm, but still my human arm is holding it up, and
Yeah.
I'm beating gravity, right? So very weak force. You need something huge to generate
I mean,
to
gr-
generate it.
you know, you make gravity, your B word all the time. Remember when you were like standing up on a thing for like 5.5 hours? Gravity is like no match for you.
Well, it's what what can I say? I bend physics to my will.
Hmm.
But the point being is that gravity is a really weak force in the scope of physics. And so little ripples in gravity across space and time, how would you ever detect such a thing? And the answer is sort of twofold. One is you need to have, in order to see gravitational waves, you have to see two really big objects, orbiting each other. What's big and massive? Black holes. So out in the
Okay.
universe, yes. Yeah, so out in the universe, if there are two black holes, maybe for some period of time, they might be orbiting each other, and eventually they actually collide and they become one black hole. Okay, so in the moments before the two black holes become one, they're spinning and orbiting each other. Okay, two big things. So we'll have some really big things, and and also we'll have really really sensitive instruments to try to detect this gravitational wave that comes off these black holes. it's got to be a big wave, and we need to be really precise in detecting it. And this part is wild. So how do you detect it? Well, so physicists have and engineers have constructed these large facilities, one of which is called LIGO. It's a laser gravitational detector. The idea is kind of interesting, all right? And the idea is that they have two lasers, okay, and they point them sort of 90 degrees away from each other, orthogonal, as Sylvia would say, right, from
Yes.
each other. And so 90 degrees,
Not a
and they'll just
scoot.
shoot them, not a scoot. No, they have to be right angles. And so they would shoot them off in 90-degree angle, like one east to one north, for instance, right? And
Mhm.
we're going to shoot them off for a mile, okay? And then we're going to reflect them back with a mirror. And then these two lasers are going to meet, okay?
Okay.
And where they meet, we're going to set up a detector, okay? And the idea is that if we can that if a gravitational wave passes past these two lasers, then that means space-time will be warping just a little bit, just a tiny bit, okay? And so let's say a gravitational wave passes through one of these two lasers and not the other, then it should take a little bit of time, difference in time, to get from to make the round trip from these two 90-degree angles,
Yeah.
okay? So if we use two lasers, okay, and this is going to be used. I actually brought some audio examples to illustrate my point here. Okay,
Okay.
if these two lasers, which are a wave, they have a frequency, they go up and down like an ocean wave. Okay, we sync them up perfectly, and they come back. They'll have one particular signal. Okay, you'll look at them and say, okay, that's what it is normally. But okay, if you make a small change, in one of the lasers, the way that they interfere with each other will suddenly have a significant effect. Okay, and this is called interferometry. The idea that you can use interference of two things to detect a change. I'm going to play an example. So I actually, before I come to the podcast, Rob, I generated some audio files using some code. And
Okay.
so they're going to be simple sounds. They're going to be it's going to be an A on a piano. Okay, so play clip one.
All
Okay,
right.
here.
Here's clip 1.
Okay, that's an A440. If you ever tune an orchestra, you'll hear the oboe play that sound. Okay, that's a sound at 440 hertz. Okay, then I generate a second sound which is slightly higher pitched. You might not be able to tell the difference. Why don't you play that second one for me, Rob? That sound much different to you, Rob?
I've very sensitive ears from all this podcasting, so I could tell the difference, but I could see
Got it.
how the layman
The
might think it's
layman.
the same. Yeah,
Right. You can like you an expert could tell, but I'll tell you,
yeah.
anyone can tell that. So, but now I'm going to have those two sounds come together and interfere. I'm going to play both of those sounds at the same time. Okay. And I have a feeling that everyone will be able to tell the difference now that they're both played together. Let's play that.
Okay, here we go.
That little pulsing that you hear, that's because the two sounds are slightly out of alignment, and it makes it absolutely obvious that they're different sounds. And that's what
Hmm.
these lasers do in LIGO. Okay. They come together, and if there's a slight change in the timing, because space and time got a little bit further away, or it stretched a little bit, you would sense those little beats and how the laser actually interacts. And that's how interferometry works. It's really great at detecting super sensitive changes. So they use interferometry to determine if there's a change in space and time from these two different directions. And
Yeah.
so they built this this whole massive array in two parts of the world. I think one is in Europe and the other was in Washington State. So that way they would have two different detectors to be able to determine if they get the same signal. And they got to be careful. They can't have like trucks driving by this thing. It's so sensitive. It's out in the middle of nowhere. And so like it was this massive undertaking to build this array. And back in 2015, they turned on the device and basically are like, okay, we hope somewhere in the universe there are two black holes that orbit and smash into each other. Let's hope and pray, and let's start waiting. And they waited like 2 days, and they got one. And they got it, and they got a signal from two black holes colliding, and it made this like. And they synthesized it into a sound that kind of went. Whoop. It's kind of like a Bugs Bunny sound. That's what it makes when two black holes collide. But it was a first confirmation of gravitational waves as predicted by Einstein like 100 years prior. It was a major thing.
Christian, they were able to detect that somewhere in our universe, two black holes collided. They did not know where or when, but they were able to tell that it happened.
Exactly right. And so the way that they analogize it is that, like, wow, a typical telescope, like you are looking into space, like you're seeing space, right? A gravitational wave detector is listening to space. It's like it heard the black hole because space and time is rippling, like if you hit a drum with a hammer or something. And that's like, and so it's like it was a big hit of a hammer very, very far away, and they know that it happened. And so I forget how many have happened. I want to say on the order of like 100 of these has happened since, and that they've detected, but it's incredible. And that what they can do, they're listening to space. I think people called it like acoustic astronomy or something. I'm getting the term wrong. I apologize. But so that was like 8 years ago, right? And so that was a bit of a long explanation. I'll pause there for questions as we get to the thing that happened very recently. But
Okay.
I know that was a lot.
Well, yeah, you mentioned that what would happen if you were in between the two black holes that were spinning and orbiting around each other. Do we know
And,
what would happen? What would happen there?
oh, that'd be a fun time, Rob. I recommend it. Is what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
well, you made it sound like that there was like some effect on time that would
ah,
happen. Yeah.
Oh, I see. So well, it's just two black holes come, and they become one big black hole at the end of at the end of that process. That's how you get a super massive black hole, is you have lots of other black holes come together. And there's a
Hmm.
super massive black hole. I mean, they're all over the place. There's a massive black hole at the center of the Milky Way galaxy on which we live.
Hmm.
You orbit it like any other big heavy thing, just like we orbit the sun. And in terms of space and time, yes, space and time stretch. And this time you wouldn't want to be on the event horizon of that black hole. I think go to Ask Dr. Hubicki number 1 or 2. I think we discuss on what it would be like to enter a black hole. But yeah, so speaking of supermassive black holes, that's what they're trying to detect now, because basically there are now gravitational waves that they want to detect off of bigger objects, and it's particularly ones that are so far away. They're basically we can only see them as being relatively soon after the Big Bang, and so there's something called the cosmic microwave background out in the sky. If you look far enough off into the sky, there's a point where you can't see any further, because soon after the Big Bang, everything was so thick, for lack of a better word, full of stuff and high temperature things that light couldn't escape, that you can't see past this cosmic microwave background, is what it's called. And it's full of all this energy out there and really heavy stuff, and it's way out there. But in a weird way, we can detect it. If you have an old rabbit ear television, and you get the snow on the rabbit ear television, a lot of that is just from stuff in our own solar system interacting with your TV antenna. But 1% of it is the cosmic microwave background radiation from the remnants of the Big Bang. Well, about 1% of that static.
Okay.
And so what people have been trying to do is they say, hey, there's all this weird stuff out in this cosmic microwave background. And I'm paying it lip service now because this is a long explanation. It would be great if we knew just how big it was. And it's really big. So it's probably we get gravitational waves off of it somehow. But the issue is that the frequency of the gravitational waves that it would give off are just way too large, or way too low. You can't really hear it with our new LIGO observatories. So they came up with a really clever way of determining whether space and time was stretching across a vast cosmic distance. And basically, they looked at special stars called pulsars, and which basically are like lighthouses. They basically spin at a constant frequency. They're very, very reliable. And they looked at the difference in timing for different pulsars across the universe and say, this timing's not quite right. if we detect if we calibrate this just right, we can determine that space and time is stretching between us and that pulsar at a particular time. So that was a major news story about 3 weeks ago in July, basically saying, hey, guess what? We are able to detect these massive gravitational waves from super far away, and it'll tell us something about how the universe started because all this stuff out there is basically from the Big Bang.
Okay. Well, thank you for taking us through all of that. Is there a next phase of what they're trying to do at LIGO?
With they're I think they're trying to. One thing you can learn is like how many black holes there are out there. Like they didn't know how many black holes would be colliding, but if you know, but so like once they determine, oh, they are happening, that's good. It would suck if we built this whole thing and there's none of them. That'd be hard to explain to people.
Hmm.
You basically turn on a giant microphone and no one speaks into it. And the that sounds like that sounds like a waking nightmare for you, Rob. Right? That
Well,
sounds
I
like
kind of feel, but it would be kind of good news. Like, hey, good news, everybody. Not a lot of black holes out there. Don't worry about them.
I'm just imagining some kind of like Jungian nightmare archetype for you as a podcaster. It's like there's a giant microphone and no one speaks into it. I don't know. That's a nightmare that you wake up from. But yeah, there's no black holes is also good. But the idea is that if you
But
know
it's
something
more
about
of a
how many
nightmare when there is a microphone and nobody's speaking near it. That's more. That's a
okay.
little bit more of the microphone
Hint duly
nightmare.
taken, Rob. Hint duly taken.
Yes. No,
All right,
you're
so
good. You're doing.
no,
You're doing
I'm
great.
kidding. So there are lots of things you can learn from the actual. Like we protected that these things happen. How often do they happen? How big are they? And what does that tell us about how much stuff there is in the universe? And that can tell us a lot about how the universe starts and, frankly, how the universe ends. And that's one of the things people try to determine. So, like the cosmic microwave background, if the stuff is a certain size, they'll say the universe is what's called flat, or the universe is curved if it's a different size. They have ways of calculating this. So that's what they're trying to determine next.
Hmm. Okay. Let's take a question for you that is from Joyful, who wants to know, will you take Emily to see the Barbie movie?
Well, I think that Emily wants to go to Oppenheimer. She's an Oppenheimer gal, an
Hmm.
Oppenheimite. She's very excited for that. She wants to see like Jack play Richard Feynman, and things like that. She's really into like like mid 20th century science in that culture of stuff. So Barbie might have to wait till DVR, but we're very excited for Oppenheimer.
Will you see it opening weekend?
When is it? Is it
This
this weekend?
weekend, Christian.
Oh, okay. You know what? I'm gonna have to make that happen. Let's go this weekend. We'll do
Hmm.
it. The
Okay.
I know I'm excited. I mean the Manhattan Project. I mean is just a historical point is a really interesting story. I'm curious, and I generally like Christopher Nolan movies. We haven't talked much. There was one time I almost talked about Tenet with you, Rob, but I thought
Yes.
better of it
Should I
because I have
check it
so many
out?
opinions.
Yes.
Have you seen Tenet
No.
eh, I have so many mixed opinions, but like Christopher Nolan's an interesting guy, an interesting director, I should say. So I want to see it. I saw Tenet. Here's what I'll say about Tenet: you watch it, turn on the subtitles. That's my advice.
I have the
There's
subtitles
something.
on for everything, Christian.
Then you're good. Then I think you'll. I wish I had that advice before I watched it,
Why?
but
Is it just they talk so fast?
it's there's something about the sound mixing of Christopher
Hmm.
Nolan movies that's well known that he likes to mix the audio of the dialogue really into the background. And so like he views dialogue as partly a sound effect. I've read an interview with him. He said this is intentional. And I'm like, that's nice, Chris, but I really want to understand what's happening in your movie about,
Right.
bizarre, your exposition heavy film. So that's just my personal take. But I mean, but Emily and I, like, we have like paraphernalia from like Richard Feynman in our house, one of the famous physicists who was on the Manhattan Project,
Mhm.
who was on the
Wow.
Manhattan Project. I mean, he's known for many Feynman diagrams, but one of the things that he was also on the Manhattan Project. We have a rocking chair that was at his house, which I like to think in when I sit and I get smarter ideas, but I don't think it works that way. I don't think it works osmotically that way. Um, But yeah, so like, so we'll be very excited to see it. I'm also really, I want to see how they do the bomb because even though they don't detonate a nuke, they do seem to detonate a very large conventional explosive to get the scene because Christopher Nolan
Hmm.
did not want to CG to do it with computer generated stuff. So I'm
Yeah.
curious how they do that.
Okay. Well, we have a great friend of ours, and especially of yours here in the chat. Gabby Pascuzzi has been chatting along here.
Oh,
Wants to know what is the optimal order for Oppenheimer and Barbie? I've heard Op then Barbie for existential reasons.
I think Gabby has nailed this in
Yeah.
terms of the that's the you need. I feel it's like a good meal. You might have a really heavy, great main course, and then you have the dessert aperitif thereafter, right? Like that's that. I think that's the way you
Yeah.
consume any experience, and the opposite just makes you feel weird. So
Yeah.
that's what we
You're
got
not
to do.
gonna go like, here's my, cotton candy and then my beef Wellington.
I might, but most people would not. I have weird eating preferences though. So, but yeah, I definitely recommend, yeah, op Barbie, not Bobby, not Barbie op.
Yes. And also, speaking of Gabby, she had a fantastic interview with Kellen Bechtold on the Road to Reality podcast last week that I very much enjoyed getting to hear the both of them chat. And so check that one out if
Check it out.
you are looking for a great podcast interview. All right. Jelly wants to know an accidental onion ring in your burgers and fries, annoying distraction or pleasant surprise? A beautiful
In
poem.
my that is written poetically. I didn't read it that way
Yeah.
before. That's great. Yeah, for me, great question. Because onion rings are on sandwiches at times and burgers and things, but often intentionally, but an accidental. Yeah, accidental is tough. The only thing that concerns me about onion rings on a sandwich is that it makes the sandwich a lot less like physically cohesive. Like it might fall apart more because you have this big giant thing on top with a big hole in the middle. So what I would do, this is my recommendation for sandwich consumption in general. Any sandwich that is sort of might fall apart is you take it and you smash it down and you cut it in half with a knife because that actually really just makes everything cohere better. And if you have a sandwich that is roughly rectangular or particularly oblong rectangular, like not close to a square, you want to cut it at an angle. And there's a reason. There are many reasons to do that. I'm not a restaurateur, but it's
Hmm.
obvious to me when you cut it at an angle. One, you have the benefits of cutting it, and everything kind of squishes together and it coheres. But also, you have the sharp edge of the cut. It's easier to take a bite into. It's a natural point
Yeah.
where you want to approach it.
Well, I feel like with the onion ring, I feel like this is really a physics issue where it's sort of like a cylinder. And then if you cut it in half, it sort of will lose some of its ability to stay up straight. It's going to flatten out.
Yeah, exactly. So you kind of have to sort of smash it down. Now, in the way you would do that, like imagine, you take an onion ring and as a circle, it is like, on your burger like that. You smash it down, you're kind of like smushing like the onion ring. You're going to separate the batter from the onion itself. However, if you were like snip that onion ring in half, hypothetically, by cutting it, you can then when you smash it, it's going to like maybe flatten out as opposed. It might not separate the batter
Mhm.
as much from the onion and smush it out. So like I think that's my projection as to how I would handle the onion ring on the burger to turn it the accident intentionally in sort of it's like chat gpt giving you a sandwich, right? You take that idea that may or may not be good and you try to improvise it into something better. That's
Yeah.
the way I would do that.
Did the blooming onion kill onion rings? I feel like I don't know. Does a person under 30 have they ever had an onion ring? Have they gone out with the times?
I don't know. So is the bloomin' onion maligned amongst the
No, I don't know if
commentariat?
it's maligned. I just feel like that. I feel like there were a lot more onion rings when I was a kid, and I feel like that almost never you see people getting onion rings.
I think tater tots are the new onion rings, in my opinion. I
Oh,
think that I the I think that like there became a thing when you go to like a brew pub or something that would be like, oh, you have elevated tater tots. Now, when I was a wee lad, tater tots were the things in my school lunches that were not properly seasoned, and they were baked in a soft and mushy form. We're not great. But now modern tater tots at a decent restaurant, like they're like elevated. Oh, it's
Yeah.
you want Thai tater tots? Here they have Thai seasoning and this sauce and scallions chopped on top, right? So like I feel like the reinvention of the tater tot could coincide with the downfall of the onion ring.
Interesting. Okay. Let's take a question from this is from one of our listeners who wants to know, Dr. Christian, were you able to have a spare pair of glasses on the island in case your main one broke? I'm blind without my glasses. So that would be my biggest fear. Do you think production would ever allow anyone to wear sunglasses?
So it's sort of a compound question here, all in the theme of glass on survivor. Great question. Um, I did have a spare pair of of glasses on the island, and if you look carefully at some of the people on the season, you'll notice that some people like will change their glasses or wear glasses when they otherwise don't. And you might be like, "Oh, does this person not really need glasses?" Well, you're also permitted to have contact lenses on
Hmm.
the island. This is, it's been well revealed that there's a med box for things that you would need to just barely function on the island. Like if you had like life-saving medication you had to take, they're not going to not cast you because you can't take that medication. They're going to give it to you and put it on the show, and you'll be great TV, and you'll have the experience. Same thing with glasses to a much lesser degree. So I had a spare pair. And I foolishly, and this led to all kinds of issues for me. I had contacts out there as well. Gabby Pascuzzi, who's a genius, wore daily contact lenses, if I recall. So she had a pack of those. However, had these kind of this quarterly pair. Like you're supposed to switch them out every 3 months. And
Hmm.
so I only had like a handful of pairs of contact lenses. I did not properly prepare for this part of the experience, and I would lose them periodically. I lost one in the first hurricane. I lost another one going into a challenge. There's actually got caught on camera. You would never know it going to a challenge. Like I'm carrying the tribe flag in episode 3. I decided I'm going to carry the tribe flag, and it's this big, surprisingly heavy thing, and I'm carrying it, and then this flag twists, and it has this like crossbar on it, and it just smacks my eye, so it rips the contact out. I'm like,
Oh my
okay,
God.
yeah, it's like right before the challenge. Thankfully, I was on the puzzle on that challenge with Gabby, and so I just relied on her for that one.
Hmm.
But I by the end of the game, I was on my last pair of contact lenses. I had no more. There was even an incident where later in the game where Allison and I were on the same reward challenge. We were going to do the swimming challenge, and for whatever reason, my eye was being bothered. Like I just didn't know what was going on. Like it just felt so itchy and sore. I didn't know what was going on. I realized it was like, and Jeff is trying to give us the rundown for the challenge. Like this is what you're going to do for the challenge, and I'm like, I'm weeping. And Christian's like, Christian, are you okay? It's like, no, it's like something with my eye, well, I'll take out my I'll take out my contact, and Dr. Joe came over, and Jeff's like, Christian, can you see without your contact? And great good old Dr. Allison Raybould came over. She's like, no, Christian's blind without them. He needs them. So she was trying to be so helpful. She was like, and it's true.
It's
My
her
vision is really
Hippocratic
bad.
oath.
Yeah, exactly. Whenever there's a medical thing, she was on the ball. She was really helpful with that stuff. And it's kind of true. Like
Yeah.
my vision was horrible without contacts. Like my vision is like -9, which is really bad. So I'm glad I have my extra pair of glasses
Hmm.
and because and enough contacts to barely make it through the day, whatever. So
So
go on.
I was to say that I was not a contact lens wearer, but I don't know if you had ever heard my story that is in a similar vein of when we had the blindfold challenge in Survivor the Amazon. I think it was down to the final four. We had the blindfold challenge, and for whatever reason, they did the blindfold challenge. And I don't know if I got like an eyelash or I got like something like in my eye. I was having a whole like issue with my eye, and medical came in and they didn't really see anything, but it was really hurting me. And we went to tribal council. And then when the jury comes in and I'm like giving like, you know, it was like a little like head bob to the jury. And Jeff looks at me, he's like, hey, like, knock that off. If I catch you any more talking to the jury, like, I'm gonna have your ass out of here. Like, okay, got it, got it. And so in the tribal council, like now, like I'm feeling like, hey, my eye is really like acting up, and I'm like trying to like get the thing like out of my eye and not call too much attention to it. And Jeff is like, that's it, Rob. Why see you winking at the jury? That's it. I'm like, no, 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 no. I swear, ask medical. I have an issue. There's a problem with my eye. And they confirm, like, they got like, okay. Then I was cleared. I wasn't winking at the jury after Jeff had given me the warning.
But it sounds like, I mean, so you had like this quasi adversarial relationship with Jeff. It seemed in your season. Is the way you seem to describe it at some point? Is that fair? Like he always thought you're up to something. Was that the
Yeah, I think
deal?
so a little bit. Maybe like that there was you know, every once in a while, like I think he would, you know, did not want me like pushing the envelope. But I think for the most part, I think that he was happy that I was there because I felt like
Oh, I'm
that
sure.
I was a go-to guy.
Well, I mean, I mean, to a different degree, like, I mean, I think that I didn't have the same relationship that you're explaining with Jeff on the island, but there are definitely times where he was like, Christian, you're pushing it a little too far. Like what, and on the opening challenge, I asked, he asked me, is like, Christian, they called you Big Bang Theory. What do you think about that? I said, I'm not sure. What is that part of the CBS family of shows? And he
Mhm.
just like gave me this look. I'm like, don't break the
Yeah.
fourth wall this much.
He doesn't like you. Don't be that cute, you know?
No,
You're like,
it was I kicked over the line a
you
little
can
bit.
be too cute by half with Jeff for
Oh,
sure.
well, speaking of glasses, that on that same day, the other part of this question was on, do they allow sunglasses on the island? And
Yeah,
I did not have sunglasses. No one does.
I
But
did.
Lirsa, you had sunglasses? You know what they did? They like Alex would wear them too, right? He would wear them. I remember
So I think that really the line in the sand was Survivor Pearl Islands. They like kicked them off the boat in their underwear, and it was like, oh, all right, this is what we should be doing. So I think that really the Amazon was like the last season where we got a bunch of stuff until modern day, where now they have like an assortment of clothes.
so like on so that's true. And Lirsa, she didn't have sunglasses, but the production didn't realize she had transition lenses, and that is
Okay.
a so which would turn sunglasses in the sun. And from a TV show perspective, that's a nightmare. Because imagine you're cutting together one shot of Lirsa, you know, like you're doing, you know, A shot, B shot. You know, Lirsa's talking to Elizabeth. You cut back to Lirsa, and all of a sudden she has sunglasses on. Like so, they actually um, uh, shipped to the island new glasses for Lirsa on like day 3. So that way she
Hmm.
wouldn't have to wear transition lenses on the show. They swapped them out. So like they really don't so they care about like the quality of the production to the point where like they found some optometrist in like Fiji to make new glasses for Lirsa and ship them out to the island so that way she wouldn't have the problem of continuity of sunglasses versus
Wow,
regular
you wouldn't
glasses
think
from
they
shot to
cared
shot.
that much about that.
uh, they care. I think there's something that people hopefully, if they take away from people who have been on the show in terms of production, they really care a lot about these details, all these kinds of little details. Like I mean, you and I have been on the show. We all get a lot of questions, probably same questions over and over again. Like, you know, where do you go to the bathroom? You know, did you survive? That kind of thing. But like
Hmm.
one, it's like, oh, you know, could you see yourself out there? You know, could you see, you know, like, you know, if you're growing a beard or not? And, so, and the answer was largely no. Like even things like when we got like a knife kit, like in like one of our rewards, the knife blade was scuffed up, so it couldn't function as a mirror finish. So that way you couldn't look. And believe me, Davey was trying to examine his look in the knife blade. He is very creative in that. And so as that way you don't get to see yourself. Like they even at the time where like we had to be evacuated from the island, we were at one point in front of them. There were places where there were mirrors. They blacked out all the mirrors with black construction paper. So that
Hmm.
way you couldn't even get a glimpse of yourself because they didn't want you to see yourself. So their production really cares about a lot of these details.
Yeah. I feel like that they want to have that in case they do give you a mirror, they want you to have that reaction on camera. So, yeah,
Yeah.
they do think about when they can pull that reveal on you. All right. Speaking of Survivor, okay. Jonathan from Ohio has a question for you, Christian. Can Christian think of a way to circumvent the time restrictions on the after season interviews? Does Rob need to be on a spaceship going through wormholes in the fabric of space and time to get more than an hour recorded with a recent contestant?
Seems like a relevant question for you, Rob. How do we make this happen? And I think we can break
So
space
let
and
me
time
just give
things
the
down.
backstory. So the Survivor 44, you do postseason interviews, and sort of that the contestants are under contract with CBS, and CBS has graciously granted us a period of time of 1 hour to speak to the Survivor contestants. But we used to do interviews after the season was over that were longer. So what would need to happen here to make this work? Because the issue is the interview that we post can't be more than an hour.
Hmm. Okay, so in terms of, well, I mean, if you in order to be able to get more than an hour, so like let's look at this from like a physics standpoint, right? Like the idea is like I think this could be sort of a good combination of like time travel physics
Hmm.
question, and of course we love to get
Basically,
you know
time
who
travel idle.
time travel. I mean, and who doesn't want more? Rob has a podcast whenever they can get it with all the great guests that you get, right? So
That's
we're
so
going to use
true.
physics. This is well known, and so how do we do physics? Use physics to our advantage, and people talk about going through wormholes, for instance, and wormholes are still a very theoretical construct. There's not any evidence that any exist. The idea and what that would do with time is unclear. Um, but what you can use is, due to our good old friend Einstein, something called time dilation. And time dilation is a cool thing. Man, we're tying everything together because probably the most famous example of time dilation is from Christopher Nolan's movie Interstellar. If you ever see that movie Interstellar, there's a point where some of the this is sort of in the previews, but there's a point where the crew needs to be near a very very heavy planet, and they're told that when you're on this planet, time for you will slow down, but you'll be on the planet for like a minute, but a lot more time will pass everywhere else, right? Uh, and that's true of being near very heavy objects, but also someone moving very, very close to the speed of light, accelerating up to close to the speed of light. Okay. So, for instance, let's say that you are having your interview with your great series of podcast guests. I believe you had one with Carolyn, great Carson, and Jam Jam, and Heidi, and of
Yes.
course, we Franny recently.
Yes. And
Yeah.
hopefully we'll have our interview with Lauren out soon as
Ooh,
well.
fantastic, right? You have all these guests. You're having an interview with one of these great guests, and you are on the clock from an hour by me, the timekeeper. Okay, I am the timekeeper. Now, what you need to do is say, hey, Christian, timekeeper, why don't you just step onto that really fast moving spaceship for a second there? Could you step onto that? Okay, I'll go step on the spaceship, and it'll rocket me around on a tour close to the speed of light. Now, an hour for me, as I'm keeping track of my clock, will actually be much more time for you here on
Mhm.
Earth. So, and when I come back, an hour has passed on my clock. I'm like, oh wow, thanks for that nice free trip on that spaceship, the great Rob Cesternino. So, all right, looks like our time is up. That's great. An hour podcast. Looks like you're already done. I guess I don't need to see it. We're all good. And
Mhm.
then all of a sudden they release the podcast, and it's, a generous Marianne length of 5.5 hours,
Yes.
and so, and that requires me to be accelerated very fast up close to the speed of light. And that's how you would have to pull off that particular time heist.
Yeah, I definitely understand what you're saying. Unfortunately, it just doesn't work of like, okay, it's 3 o'clock. It's not like dropping like your kids off at daycare where they say, like, all right, you have the person from for the next 60 minutes and I'll be back in an hour to come pick them up. So it's I feel like not quite as easy as getting the PR person to get to the near the speed of light.
Yeah, unfortunately. So it's only like part of the problem. So I mean, you have to find some other workarounds for making it come across that way. I mean, yeah, there are other creative ways, but I think that at least this gets me to tie into another Christopher Nolan film. So I'll accept this.
Yes, yes. Okay, big weekend here for the Nolans. Okay, Liz and Julia are celebrating somewhere. All right, so let's then. Okay, we talked about the spaceship. How about this question about traveling? Maybe not to space, but overseas. Alex from Roswell. My wife and I are making our first trip to London in September. Any recommendations to eat or add the path sites to see?
Well, I have been to London actually for a research visit. I was working on a biology study with a great biology collaborator of mine, Dr. Monica Daly, and who studies how birds run. Birds like guinea fowl, ostriches, and things like that. And at the time, she had a laboratory out in the London area, and I got to come and assist in the bird collection experiments.
Yes,
Omer Zahir would be very
you'd be
jealous of
jealous.
my experience. And so I spent like a week or more in a barn, chasing birds, which I'm told means something else in Britain. So I mean,
Oh,
literally chasing
yeah.
small fowl down a runway, saying "run, run, run, run," and seeing and in front of a bunch of high speed cameras to see how they move, which was its own interesting experience. But while I was there, I didn't prepare for my trip to London, but the London hack that I learned very quickly that everyone told me, oh yeah, you didn't know that, which was get the Indian food. The Indian
Okay.
food is incredible. I mean, of course, I went and I tried to do some of the tourist things. I was like, oh, what do I know about British food? I know like cottage pies or what is it?
Shepherd
Shepherd's
pie?
pie,
Yeah.
shepherd's pie. There's also cottage pie. I know those things, and the fish and chips with the mushy peas. I tried those. Those are no disrespect intended to the great monarchy, but it was the Indian food that someone took me to. I was like, oh, this is, and it was really when I really understood like, oh, I really like Indian food, and I really took to it after that. So that's often what people say to eat is the great Indian food. And then of
Yes.
course, if you're into the various liquors, you go for the Scotch. So that's what you go for as well.
Okay. Now, do you think that the great Indian food will be a reward on the upcoming Survivor UK?
So that would make sense, right? They'd have some local cuisine because all be so UK is being filmed in India. Did I see other versions are being filmed in India as well? I
Oh,
saw some kind of news
I
article.
didn't even know that was the case.
I saw something popped across one of my feeds. I assume it was correct. Maybe it was some kind of deep fake, but something to the effect of there being multiple versions of Survivor being filmed in India. And I was like, well, that can't be U.S. Survivor. That's I would have heard if that was not in Fiji. We'd have heard of that by now.
Mhm.
But I mean, uncertain in local delicacies are almost part of the tradition. I mean, Indian food in India, and Fiji, of course, has the Bula Burger Bar. So
Yes.
yeah, so exactly.
Yeah, that's true. Let me see. Can the chat confirm any of that? Okay, well, we'll get you that answer by
Yeah.
the end of this podcast.
Apologies for the fake news if I put that out there to the world.
Okay. All right. All right. So you asked a question, and we were talking about how you were studying how birds run. I think this is a good question to segue into what is your favorite role in Goose Goose Duck?
Oh yes. So I think we mentioned this very briefly at the end of one of our recent podcasts that I had been playing this game with RHAP's own Puya Zen. Sorry, I can never pronounce his
Please,
last name.
Zambakili. Yeah.
Zen Vakili, thank you. And he hosts an online game of Goose Goose Duck, which is more or less like the Among Us game. It's like the if you're a play, it's like Traders on the reality show, which which is on my DVR. I will watch the replay. I'll tell you at some point here. But like but where basically you have a bunch of people who are quote unquote the good guys and a few people who are bad guys who are trying to kill off all the good guys, while the good guys are trying to suss out who's bad and then evict them, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so Goose Goes Duck is one of the more recent games that's popped up. It's been very popular. I've enjoyed playing it. I pop on every once in a while on Puya's stream, and when I get some time. The interesting thing about these dynamics is all the social deduction. It's really interesting. I mean, it's like rapid fire Survivor in some ways, in that you have to very quickly figure out who's really on your side and who isn't, based upon their actions, based upon their stories, who's doing what, why. There's a lot of elements that are familiar to Survivor that way. And what's interesting about that particular game is that there are all kinds of specialized roles. Imagine this was Survivor, for instance. Let's say there were specialized powers in Survivor. I know, perish the thought that such a thing might happen on Survivor. But let's say there was a power where after a vote, after a tribal council, you had a power to find out who a particular person voted for, like a detective, right?
Yeah.
That might be like what a detective might do in this game. And there's always specialized powers like that only one particular role can do. And what's particularly interesting about having all these different roles is that it kind of turns there are all these different variations on the typical gameplay, one of these sort of imposter-like games. So these imposter-like games, there's often most of the people are good, a couple of the people are bad, and all the bad people know who's bad, so they can all coordinate, right?
Mm-hmm.
They can plan. It's like, okay, so if they catch each other in a room, we're like, hey, Rob and I, we're gonna go get rid of Gabby. We can say that. We would never do such a thing, Gabby.
Would not do that.
We would never do that. This is hypothetical, but there are roles in this game which, for instance, that will make one particular good person look like a bad person to the bad people. It's called the mimic in this particular case, and it changes the dynamic of the game completely on its head. So, we might look around. There might be three of us that we think are bad, Rob, but one of us is actually good. Okay, and we don't know which one. I mean, it's not me. I know I'm really bad. You might know you're really bad, but you might not know that Gabby is actually, she looks bad, but she actually is good. So you risk the danger of, I might pull aside Gabby and say, Gabby, okay, we're both bad. Let's go take out this other person.
Right.
And I've just revealed to her that information about about the game, one, that I'm bad, and that another person is good. So it really creates an additional tension to the standoff. Because when you play games like this, normally the bad people have all the information.
Sure.
And so they proceed really confidently. But this adds an extra layer of paranoia.
Does Gabby the mimic know who are the bad guys, or she just? Yes. Okay.
She doesn't, because if she did, that would end the game, right? If she knew who the bad guys were, then she could say, hey, it's Christian and Rob, they're bad, get them out, right? So she has to play a delicate game of pretending like she's bad without knowing who is bad. So she might go into a conversation with every single person acting ever so slightly suspicious. So as to signal, in case she ends up in a room with us, we say, oh, okay, no, Gabby, she's with us. She is suspicious and bad, right? So it creates this weird ambiguity of a line of, is she good? Is she bad? And we might, and it's really fascinating. So the idea of this mimic character, that should be added into something like, in my opinion, the Traders. And now, Rob, you watch the Traders, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do the Traders know who the other traders are?
Yes.
Traders.
Yes, they do.
This would be a wonderful, I say without having yet seen the season, this would be a great wrinkle for the Traders, where they say, hey, Traders, there are, three traders, but it looks like there's three traders, but one of them isn't, right? And that could add.
Yeah, but the traders meet up at nighttime. I don't know how you would do that.
Oh, is that a thing? Okay, so they actually meet up at nighttime to discuss things. Okay,
got it. If me, you, and Gabby are the traders, then it's at nighttime when everybody's sleeping, we get together and we have our hoods on. We're like, haha, we're the traders.
Okay, so it's not the difference between the Traders and Among Us or Goose Goose Duck, these games that are, by the way, often free to play if you want to play them. Everyone votes in a meeting. It's like a tribal council that happes. So there's not a point where you and I have to get together and say, ha, let's go get rid of, somebody.
Yeah.
We throw votes out there, and we have to communicate in a much more surreptitious way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a really interesting role,
The
and I think it's a
mimic.
neat twist. Yeah, the mimic. And it's just a different way to think about these social deduction games, which I think are. I wish I got to play more. They're very interesting.
Okay. Looks like Inside Survivor says that they believe that Survivor UK has been filmed in the Dominican Republic.
Dominican Republic. That is nowhere close to India. I must
Okay.
have got.
Now
I must have thought you were
again,
making a
but they're
reference.
not even confirming. They believe that's the
Got
case.
it.
So
Okay. All right.
we'll see. We'll see.
Fake
Okay.
news.
All right. It was a deep fake. Okay. How about the question from Cameron Hahn? Do you think that current Survivor makes it too difficult for players deemed threats to win?
Yeah, I was thinking about this because this is always one of the, one of the perennial balances in Survivor. I mean, you're one of the earliest casualties that I remember of, wow, you got to make sure Rob's gone before the end. And at that point, it was, the final three before the final two. Then they introduced, starting in Survivor, Cook Islands, the final three, arguably because they're like, oh, Terry Dietz was so close to the end. If only he had gotten there, he could have won. That's my internal canon of what happened. But Cook Islands,
Yeah.
just the final three. So people started going out at the final four as a threat. Then they introduced the fire making season 35, where you might be able to punch through the final four to the end. Well, then guess what? People at the final five tend to be voted out as the threat. They keep pushing back when the quote unquote the threat keeps getting voted out. And then you have idols on top of that. So you might start voting out the big threats like an Omer at 6 or something like that, right? So the survivor nihilist in you might be like, what's the point of all this? If you're just going to keep pushing back when the threats are voted out, then you're just going to get voted out earlier, right? And that is true. One thing that is also technically true is that in the modern Survivor, you have all these things that push back when the threat would be voted out, and you consistently have 18 players as opposed to 20. So there are actually fewer tribal councils, period, in which everyone is likely to be vulnerable. And so theoretically, any one particular threat has fewer votes they have to survive. So I think on average, I wouldn't be shocked if still, in spite of all this, like on average, maybe these threats might have a slightly better chance. Now, I'm not sure that has worked out so far. I mean, I know that last season Carson was deemed a really big threat, and in spite of a lot of maneuvering, he still was vulnerable at 4, and the poor guy got axed there.
Hmm.
But I'm trying to think this from a big numbers perspective. There's fewer tribal councils you might have to survive where before the end nowadays than maybe in the 30s. That's what I'm thinking about right now. What are your thoughts, Rob?
There are fewer tribal councils for sure, and also fewer days in the game. So things are going to be moving much more rapidly. But I feel like that the players are so smart, and there's so much like meta game that goes on where that in following the end of the 30s, like I think that the players sort of adapted to, okay, these are the types of players that win the game, and then you saw some people who probably would have been considered unconventional winners in Erica and Marianne and Gabler come out and win. And maybe even in Survivor 44, I mean, Jam Jam was a pretty big threat who came out
Yeah.
and won the game. Was he sort of like, we still saw people who were sort of like more of the traditional threats get targeted, like Franny, she's winning the challenges. She needs to go. And Carson, he seems like a strategic threat. And nobody was going to take Carson to the end. No, out of all the people I talked to, every single person was like, yeah, Carson was not in my final 3 plans. So everybody planned on taking out Carson. So I do wonder though, will the game sort of the meta switch to, oh, we got to take out the the people that are the most likable. These are the people that we need to be targeting. And then you have the other people that might have been more of the conventional threats who aren't as likable. Maybe those are the people that win a couple seasons in a row.
That's what I think that you're hitting. I think what is the real issue, which is not necessarily the format, it's the metagame. It's what people perceive to be a threat to win. And that is true irrespective that kind of cycling will happen, irrespective of whether or not they voted out at 3, 4, 5, or 6, or 7, or 8, or
Hmm.
whatever. Right? It's about the narrative of who is perceived as a threat, and people come in preloaded with that, and it's honestly probably seasonal. It's almost like you can view it as a seasonal issue, not like a particular season survivor, but
Right.
like there are seasonal trends. Like, oh, and people know to buy more canned goods in the winter or something, right? That kind of thing. There are, that one thing proceeds to another, and it might not be super predictable, but like there will be maybe it's more, maybe think of it as a trend. What's
Yeah.
trendy? What is the trendy survivor player at the moment? Which certainly was not and I mean, let's flash back to the earliest days of Survivor. What would people have presumed to be a threat at that point? Well, in the original season, people didn't think about, oh, I got about the threats. It was like, oh, I don't know. Here's an alliance. Let's pick them off. Whatever. I guess for the most part. But I remember it was a stunning thing when Hunter Ellis was voted out first on the season. Like, what is this? He's gone. He's like the biggest dude. Why would you vote off this dude? And it was
Hmm.
we weren't familiar with that mode of play. And then at some point it became like, oh, these quote unquote survivalist dudes are not necessarily going to be these winning survivor players, and they weren't necessarily viewed that way, for at least for a while. I mean, I'm sort of stereotyping a general set of seasons, but there is a cycle of the metagame. And I think that if you were to try to get ahead of that, I think what you need to look at is the last season that all the players saw.
Yeah.
And
The challenge
yeah,
is, that it's like, two steps forward, one steps back, where you have like, okay, people that are going to go play 45, they saw season 43, but they didn't see season 44.
right.
Then you're going to have, people that play in season 46. They saw season 43. They didn't see season 44, or they saw season 44, but they didn't see season 45. So,
Right.
like, the game takes, these incremental steps, but it's hard to really advance it.
I mean, like, I could totally see how in season 46 they would say, we got to prevent a Tika 3 from getting to the end. And, like, that's the easy rallying cry because they just saw it.
Hmm.
There are people on my season who were like, oh, we can't let Christian go on an idle run
Like
like Ben
Ben.
Bombs from
Yeah.
season
Yeah.
35. It's
Yeah.
that was that it's metagame, and metagame is true of many games, and it's just interesting how seasonal it is on Survivor based upon what people have seen.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about a different game. Jason Lee wants to, has Christian started the newest Zelda game, Tears of the Kingdom? And if so, how is he finding it so far?
Oh my God, we're in the game section here. This is yes, I have bought Tears of the Kingdom. Yeah, and I played it far more than I care to admit in public. It was
You
I
love
don't
it.
play a lot. Yeah, I love it. I love it. It's really great, and it's exactly up my alley. I think I had mentioned in a previous podcast with you. I played the prequel to this, which was the Zelda Breath of the Wild, and I don't love every Zelda game necessarily, but these are just, they hit me at home because they give me the freedom to do what I want. Now, when I turn on a video game, I might want a couple. There's a couple things I might want, and normally one of those things is, I don't tell me what to do. And this
Hmm.
particular game is just basically just turns you out in the open world and says, do whatever. Here's a bunch of things you can do. But on top of that, they decided to throw in engineering into this game, which is pretty crazy.
How so?
So yeah, they gave your character the ability to just take random devices, like, oh, there's a motor there. There's like a fan for like a drone right there. There's a wheel. Here's a stick, and you can turn it into a car and drive it across the landscape. Or you can turn it into a plane and you assemble it into a plane piece by piece and then fly it around. And there are people who have basically assembled giant robot mechs with lasers attached to their heads to shoot their enemies. It's not something you typically see in an adventure game with a guy in a loincloth carrying a sword, but it actually scratches that physics itch for me. And it's super relevant because, like, I'm watching this and I'm like piecing together in my head, like, oh, this is actually a very interesting coding programming challenge. You can actually look online. There are people who have done these crazy engineering builds in this game. Someone managed to make a calculator in the game, a very, very simple calculator. but like I think about how you simulate all these physics. That's what we do in robotics a lot. We'll have to make computer simulations of our robots so that we see how they're going to work before we code up our robot and put it on our robot and break it and set us back months. So I'm looking at this like, oh, they clearly have really put a lot of thought into making their physics stable. So that way, when you put a door attached to a wheel, attached to a spring, attached to a sled, that it does something that makes sense and actually is sensible in a weird way. It's fascinating. I'm really enjoying it a lot.
Okay. All right. Best Zelda yet?
Yeah, for me.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Wow. That after a lifetime of playing Zelda, I mean, that's thrilling that they have hit a new high.
Well, I mean, and I tell you, I mean, and it's apparently controversial. Not to go too gamer on people. It's not that controversial. It's a well received game, but like there's there are people that like different things in games. Like there was that Last of Us TV show, for instance. Remember, like that came out, and that's a very different kind of game. That's a game where you're literally playing through a story. You do this thing, then there's a story. There's this thing, that's a story. A lot of people like that stuff. I do not like playing games like that because it's telling me what to do. Like you got to do this. Now you got to do that. It's like, no, don't tell me what to do. And so this
don't tell me what I can't do.
Yeah, pretty much. Like I will go to great length to not do what the game tells me to do. It makes me feel like I'm in control, I guess. But and so this is a recent departure in these Zelda games. They basically said, hey, just do what you want when you want instead of doing it on our schedule. So I enjoyed that. So
okay. All right. Christian one, we have a question for you from John. Will Ray Seahorn finally win an Emmy?
Oh, Ray Seahorn, I'm rooting for you, but she's got some stiff competition. She's up against like 4 White Lotus actresses.
So you're very conflicted.
This is a conflicted category. I mean, it's a once again, our dear friend Mike White is cleaning up all the categories of nominations. I think he's up for
yes.
So I'm a longtime Better Call Saul fan, but of course I am won over by the White Lotus, just like the rest of
What
America.
are the nominees? She's nominated for Best Supporting Actress,
Best Supporting Actress in a Drama, and before there wasn't a conflict because the White Lotus was part of a limited series category, but now it's been changed to a drama category. So now they're in direct competition with the series finale of Better Call Saul for all the categories. Yeah. So and like just there's and I think between Succession and the White Lotus, like they are cleaning up all the nominations. So it'll be a tough road for Ray, but I did love her performance at the end of Better Call Saul. I hope well for her because I feel like this is a long nomination, long overdue.
Carol Burnett is also nominated in the same category
for Better Call Saul.
The acclaimed actress has chosen to submit the actress. Sorry. So Carol Burnett was vying for a nomination. Sorry.
Yeah, because she had multiple episodes in the last season of Better Call Saul.
Oh, I recall. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
For sure.
Okay.
For sure. Yeah. So I'm conflicted between my loyalties here, but I would not be I would not be upset to see Mike White taking 3 Emmys home again. That was surreal to watch last year.
Yes, and gave a speech about Survivor.
He did, and he also said, I felt that was being subtweeted by him. He was like, everyone knows that you got to reduce your threat level on Survivor. I'm like, Mike, I get it. You don't have to rub it in front of this whole Emmy audience. This is all clearly about me.
Yeah. Look, no comment. Okay. All right. So, outstanding supporting actress in the drama series. Okay. Oh, wow. There was a lot of nominations. Okay. We got 8 people. No, I mean, come on, Emmys. Like, you can't nominate 8 people in a category. You got to make some cuts here. That being said, the nominees are Aubrey Plaza, The White Lotus, Elizabeth Debicki, The Crown, J. Smith Cameron, Succession. She really didn't have that much to do in the last season of Succession. Jennifer Coolidge, The White Lotus. Megan Fahey, The White Lotus. Ray Seahorn, Better Call Saul. Sabrina Impacciatore, The White Lotus.
Well done.
Simona Tabasco, The White Lotus. I mean, not for anything. that Jennifer Coolidge was great. Ray Seahorn, though, I feel like did a lot more heavy lifting.
She had to carry the end of that show. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not gonna put my thumb on the scale. Mike could be listening, and it's we'll see. I wish him well. So
Look,
we'll see how it goes.
I loved both seasons of The White Lotus.
Yeah, they're really
But
good.
I mean that really, I don't even think that. I think Ray Seahorn. I don't know. Should she be outstanding actress in a series? I don't even know if she's a supporting actress. She's like the co-lead of Better Call Saul.
She really, especially by the end of the show, that's what I felt. But I guess that's how they decided to nominate. But yeah. So we'll see.
Yeah,
These are hard to predict. I mean, well, of course, our one obscure reality TV show, Survivor, is up for an Emmy this year.
yes, congratulations.
Back on the list.
We're back,
after so many years.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's go back to another question. This one is a serious question from Serious Stan.
Yes.
Why, in your opinion, has Survivor remained the most classy reality TV show of all time? And why did it stand the test of time? Big appreciation to you both. Signed, Serious Stan.
Yeah, so I mean, it's funny he used the word classy, and that's appropriate because I think that's literally how they see themselves. Like in that, like when I was going on the show, like I had to tell my superiors at work that give them some reason I was going on a show. I was leaving work for 7 weeks, and I was like, and they told me I could tell them I was going to go on a classy reality TV show. That's what they told me I could say. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to say that because the mere fact that I have to call it classy is going to be. So I just told people it's going to go on television. But like that's how they view themselves. And I think that they do strive to do better and create new things and push the envelope, I think, in interesting ways each season. And so I think that does come from the creative leads of the show. I think that does come from Jeff and the various high level producers. They don't want it to be trashy. There can be
Definitely not. And just to speak to that, where Survivor, and I think that this is probably a credit to Jeff, and because that he has, assumed like a creative role in the back half. And so not only was he like the face of Survivor, like this is also like his vision. And I feel like that it's like would be such a personal indictment if it ended up getting trashy. I don't think he would want to put his name and face on something that was trashy. So I really do believe that, and you hear Jeff when he talks on his podcast of how passionate he is about it, that Jeff really does not want to make Survivor like anything less than sort of like the tentpole flagship of reality TV.
Yeah, I mean, when you're at when you have this quality of what you want to produce, I mean, like you don't want to if you have that kind of pride in it, especially when they're not threatened in the ratings. Like where this would become an issue would be like, imagine it was really flagging in the ratings and there was concern that it might not stay on the air. I think that's where there's a lot of pressure to shows like, oh, we got to come up with some new twist, some new thing that pushes the envelope. That way it gets people watching again. And if they don't feel threatened in that way, they can continue to do things in a way that they want to be proud of. And I think that helps. And in terms of why the show continues to be successful, I think it's because people get a lot of different things out of the show. It appeals to a lot of different audiences for different reasons. I mean, some people, like myself, I enjoyed the strategy of it, the political machinations of how everything moves in the game. I thought of it as like an interesting intellectual experiment. It's like a giant game of chess with people. And so, but there are people that just enjoy the adventure of the adventure of it. There are people who enjoy the challenges. I mean, a lot of little kids like to watch the challenges and imagine how they would do in it, how they would be on the island. So a lot of people, it's vicarious and fun. Then there are a lot of people who love the mess. There are people who love when there's a fight, and you can get all of those things in a good season of the show, and everyone can be happy. There's something for everyone. And I feel like I'm only scratching the surface with these things. So I think that's one of the reasons that it's lasted so long.
There is something that is implicitly beautiful and simple of the concept of people living together on an island and having to rebuild a new society. And this idea, which was probably captured in Lord of the Flies and a million other stories about how do people left to their own devices on an island, how do they function? How do they get together? What do they do? What are their laws? And where does it go? And people are fascinated by this idea. And they've thrown so many wild inventions at it, some good, some not. And people keep coming back season after season, year after year, because the concept is so pure.
Yeah, I think that, and the the format itself lends for a lot of emergent storytelling. And that's, again, that's reality show TV in general, but just the simple format that there's drama of people being voted off every week in this very simple setting, and the ways that people handle that can be different from time to time. You never know when there is a new way that people approach this, or there's a new dynamic that hasn't quite come up before, and that sometimes sticks out in people's minds. I mean, I think that a big example was back when in season 16 in Fans versus Favorites. That's when I feel like that was the advent of what I feel was the modern Survivor. That's when all of a sudden people went from, oh, people are being voted out, sometimes surprise, most of the time you get it, it's because this person lost the spear or something, to a point where, like, no, everyone is blindsided for some kind of strategic political reason,
Mhm.
every episode, at least near the end. So, like, oh, all of a sudden this is a different mode of the game, a different meta game, right? We talked about the meta game before, and I think that seeing those evolutions from time to time also help refresh it in people's minds, and I hope we get to see something like that happen again sometime soon.
Yeah. Christian, I've asked ChatGPT to explain to us why we love Survivor. Are you interested to hear this beautiful poem?
Of course, more than anything.
Okay. Upon a distant isle, under a burning sun, a spectacle unfolds. An unyielding battle begun. Survivor, our heart's delight, etched in time's grand design, a testament to human spirit, like a well aged wine. A tapestry of life, its canvas is the earth. Each season tells a tale. Each contestant proves their worth. The grit, the strife, the will to thrive, when put to the ultimate test, is what we cherish as we bear witness to this quest. The fire's warmth, its beacon bright, the symbol of life's ember, illuminates our homes, a tale we'll long remember. The whispered plots, the trust sought, alliances born and broken. These are the moments, the words of love unspoken. Beautiful.
Stephen would be proud, right? It's just
He would.
Stephen is pro AI, large language model poetry, right? I'm
No,
assuming.
he is not. He is not. He wants AI. He wants AI that can do his taxes. I'm like, I'm pretty sure that exists. It's called TurboTax. I'm like,
Yeah. So yeah, some of that I was just like, oh, this is just like insert thing here is great, but then at the end it started weaving some more stuff in that was relevant to the subject matter. Not too bad. And yeah, so I mean, so in large language models, again, sort of improv. We could take that improvisation from that large language model. Like, hey, there's some things there. We could tweak it. Very interesting.
yeah. Okay. Christian, this is from your former student from fall 21 and spring 22, Ben. He wants to know, when will walking robots like Digit and Cassie be? Where will they be in 50 years? What will they be doing for humans in both industrial and non industrial applications? P.S. I miss your classes so much. You were the best professor I ever had. You were always the most genuine and passionate person. Nobody compares to Dr. Christian Hubicki, and I mean nobody.
Well, thank you, Ben. This is why you got an A. I'm just kidding. No, that's very kind. I got to put that in my tenure packet. But it's good to hear from you. The Yeah, I've been very fortunate that we've had some great students over the last several years of being a professor. Not too long ago, my sister was at her work, and she was doing a job training of some kind, and she was talking to one of the new employees, and she's like, and he's like, Hubicki, that's an uncommon name.
Yeah.
And she's preparing to, like, it's like, Christian from Survivor, and she's like, Christian was my professor in college. And this was like, she lives across the country from me. So it was just kind of a wild thing. So it was like probably one of the prouder moments of my life that like a student from my classes remembered who I was, and like, oh yeah, and just ran and like, and that they remembered what I taught them. So that was great. And so thank you, Ben. And now Ben's asking about something I don't actually talk as much as I might on this podcast, which is walking robots. It's my like PhD specialty.
Yes.
And so he's referring to this robots called like Digit and Cassie. And these are robots that are literally in my laboratory. They're models of robots that were built by a company started by my grad school friends. They decided to, when they graduated, they spun off and started a company. And I decided to go into the lucrative field of teaching. So that's what I went into. No, but I went into research and academia, and they went to the startup. And so startups are actual for walking robots, like two-legged walking robots, like your C3PO style things, but hopefully a little better at walking, are huge now. And industries are starting to pick up on them. So this company that makes Digit is basically a two-legged, two-armed robot it's designed for picking up packages and doing very simple factory work. It's what they wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is where it can work in and around people and be upright in a factory. That's what they just got a massive investment from like Jeff Bezos from Amazon specifically.
Yeah.
For that, because they're interested in automating all kinds of things. There's an interest in and it surprised me to put these robots in factories. I was like, really? Yeah. At first that surprised me because robots in factories have been around for a while. You just mount them to a wall. They don't necessarily need to walk.
Mm-hmm.
But it turns out there are lots of places in a factory that are dangerous to get into. Like if you talk to some automotive companies like I have, like they're funding some of our bipedal robotics work. They're like, look, there are times we want a robot to be able to go in the range inside of the danger zone of another big robot, that if we wanted to do a repair in that area with a person, we'd have to shut the robot down. We have to shut everything down. That would shut down the entire plant for goodness knows how long. When you shut down one stage, you shut down them all. Oh yeah,
and this is Digit.
Yeah, it's Digit. That's Digit. That's right. That's the newest version of Digit. That's version 4. I have a version 3. Yeah, so it walks. So that this was built. My major professor in graduate school started this company called Agility Robotics that makes these robots. And they now they've grown to like a few hundred employees. It's ridiculous. And they're not the only ones, because there's a market apparently for people wanting to make robots that can go into factories and do things and walk around. And Elon Musk famously last year unveiled his new robot called Optimus, which is named after the Transformer. So he's trying to get Tesla into the game of making these robots. There's another company called Aptronic, another company called Figure that just started up, and I'm leaving on a few more. But like, all of a sudden, there's a boom of these businesses because like before, these were just research platforms, meaning that they were just things I had in a laboratory that's only useful to the scientists because we're trying to study how to make these robots walk better, how to not fall down, how to use less energy when they move and be safe around people. But nowadays they're turning it into an industry, which is very exciting. And in terms of where they want to go, it's going to be first in the factories. And the reason is very simple. It's because factories are more tightly controlled. What things are happening in factories are mostly not crazy. Like there's not all of a sudden a bunch of school children who's going to run into the factory that you all of a sudden have to avoid and step around and not fall on, for instance. Everything is very cleanly laid out. This is an area for this. This is an area for that. That's easier to do because the robot knows what to expect. However, as soon as you get a robot out in the world with people who aren't employees who know how to handle it, you get them walking in hallways, you get them out in the woods, things become more chaotic and more difficult for the robot to predict, and it tends to work less well. And this is where robot cars still run into problems. They're getting better. The robot cars are getting better. But like when you talk to like robot car experts, they'll say, hey, we are still concerned about the small percentage that something is going to crazy is going to happen that it doesn't know what to handle. And they call that how to handle it. They call it the long tail. That you have this world of possibilities, this stuff that happens most often, like your normal driving conditions. It's like a bell curve, Rob, like in statistics, of the bell curve. Stuff that happens
Hmm.
a lot. It's in the big, thick part of the bell curve. And then off in the distance, way at the end, this tiny tail are the crazy bad things you don't typically see all the time. And so that long tail, that's where those robot cars tend to have car accidents. Like, how do you test for things that rarely happen? It's tough. And it's the same thing for legged robots when they have to go out into the world where things are where there's a long tail of bad things that can happen. And that's going to take a while. That's going to take a few decades, which is good for me as a professor with hopefully a few more decades on his career. It's good news for the researcher in me because I don't always have to sell these as products. I can run my lab with my students and we come up with cool stuff. But it's going to be a challenge to get these in the world. And why? And I think that there's a big question: is why? Is this to take people's jobs away? Well, yes. I'm not kidding. It's not the goal. But there are certain tasks that right now only people can do. And often these jobs are dangerous. The most dangerous job in America is being a logger. Okay, and like they enjoy, getting timber in the woods, at least as of a census in 2021. These are people that have to walk around in the woods on their feet, tromping around where it could be raining, rain or shine, and there's heavy objects being dropped from over the place. They have to climb up a tree, take off all these. It's an incredibly dangerous job, and only people can walk around in that environment reliably. There
Yeah,
are
I
machines in
mean,
there.
there was I saw one time that there was like they built like a tin woodsman and they sent
Hmm.
him out to try to go do this job because it was so dangerous and he just like rusted solid in the middle of the forest and
Yeah.
it required you needed like to be oiled and lubricated and it was not ideal.
Yeah. No, I mean, and these are hard problems. And again, good job for me as a researcher because basically every grant proposal I write is say, hey, this is super important, but it's really hard. Therefore, fund my research. But like these things are hard out in the real world, and I think that it's easy that if you are a YouTube consumer or like a person who's watching videos of robots on YouTube that are really awesome, for instance, the Boston Dynamics company. I haven't mentioned them. I really, really should. They're the most famous robotics company in the world, as far as I'm concerned, because they
Mhm.
have their Atlas robot that does backflips, it does dances, it will run up and down, like it'll jump onto like structures, and it'll do it's incredible. It's like cream of the crop, the most amazing bipedal performance you can see of any robot. And I'd say, well, what's the problem? Why is this not everywhere? And we in the
Hey,
field
what's
know,
the
and
problem with my
what's the
dog?
Yeah, and I mean, if you talk with people at Boston Dynamics, sorry, I'm just riffing. I'm just riffing. I never got to build off that. I
Sorry.
mean, but if you do, if you talk with people at that at the company, I mean, they'll tell you it's like it's not 100%. It doesn't work all the time,
Yeah.
and it's really hard. And I think that is the key. Whether it's AI, these large language models, these stable diffusion image generators, whatever these are, or it's robots doing cool things. It's not about what can we get it to do. It's about what can we get it to do reliably. So what can we count on it to do?
Right.
And like the Tin Man you mentioned getting rusted in the woods, can we count on it to do that? And that's the real gap. And can we count on these robot cars to really almost never crash? What can we count on? And that I think that should, if you are encountering a new technology that looks like it could take the world by storm, if you're going to question it yourself and say how realistic is it, you have to ask yourself like, okay, how reliable is this? Or ask the person who's telling you how reliable is it?
Yeah.
And I think that that's what you got to think about.
I can't get my laptop not to crash, let alone a car.
Yeah, that's its own thing. I mean, software issues are. I mean, some of these poor robot like I feel for some of these robot companies, Rob. I mean, like I've done live robot demos, and like you spend years developing the control,
Sure.
the programming, and then all of a sudden the computer crashes for completely stupid reasons, and then it falls in front of everyone, and then everyone says, "Oh, this robot's so stupid," and you're like, no, it was a Windows update," it's just something
Mhm.
silly like that.
Yeah. All right. We'll see when we ultimately get Digit and Cassie on the road. I got one more
Yeah,
question for you, Christian.
yeah, sure.
All right. Marmeme wants to know your intelligence and charisma is absolutely captivating. I know it's likely not to have been an easy road to become such a unique and well rounded person. So, my question is, what are some of the harder experiences you've had in life to get where you are now? What would you tell your former self to get through the tough spots? Christian, if you had the time traveling idol, what would you do? What would you go back and tell yourself? There's a
Well,
lot
first
there.
off, first off, I would tell myself to, like, first off, to thank this person for their lovely compliment. I swear I don't pick out these questions just because they have compliments in them, but it's very nice to see. I thought it was an interesting question. And thank you so much. But like, I, this might actually work on two levels. My answer here is that you say these very nice things about me, like, oh, think of a well-rounded person. Oh, that's so nice. I don't always think of myself as a well-rounded person. Sometimes I'm like, oh man, I spent an entire week just thinking about work stuff. I'm so boring. I was thinking about work. I was thinking about get this thing done, and I think that it's because I think that one of the things I would tell myself, because I would think this about other people. I would look at other people, I was like, man, that person, they have their life together. They know what's going on. Man, how do they do all that? That's incredible. And you realize that you might not look like that to them. They might not realize like how I view them, and that everyone's got their own thing. You got to remember, everyone's got their own thing going on, as much as it might look on the outside that they have things together. Because I'll tell you, there are days, today, in my life and career where I definitely do not. I mean, like, look at you, Rob. Rob, you put out how many podcasts in a week?
Yeah.
It's a lot, right?
I don't know. Maybe if that's like how it looks from the outside looking in, but I know I just watched a documentary on Netflix called Quarterback, where they followed three different NFL players around. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe how much these guys are getting done in a day. They have to do so much prep. I mean, I feel like I'm doing nothing compared to what these other people do. And I just think that, like, from the outside looking in, I feel like that we're probably all doing so much, but it comes second nature, I think, at times to all of us that do what we do. But it's pretty impressive what many people are doing.
Exactly. And I think that, so there's kind of two sides of this coin. One is you look at people and say, look, what they do is impressive, but they're people. And also, maybe what I'm doing is more impressive than I realize. And if someone saw what I was doing all day, they'd be like, wow, I didn't know how to do that. It's easy to,
Hmm.
for some of us, it's easy to discount your own accrued life skills. Um, so like, and I think that that would be so, because there are definitely times, like even in my own career, I'll look at someone's like lab website for, like, they run a research lab, and like I run a research lab, and I look at, oh my goodness, how do they have so many scientific papers? How do they do that? How do you do this? And yeah, so I think that it's just good to have a healthy view of yourself, that just because you look at other people and are impressed by them, that doesn't mean you're also not doing great things, or things you can be not or things you can be proud of, or things that make your life fulfilling. Okay. So I think that if I were to tell myself, it's like, look, just realize that you're doing okay. Don't freak out, just because, don't compare yourself too much to all of these people that you look up to. You're probably doing fine.
Yeah. Great advice. Is that what you would go back and tell yourself?
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, because there are times, like, I mean, people will tell. I mean, I spent a lot of my adulthood as a grad student, and people, there are a lot of grad students who've been on Survivor, not the least of which is one, Gabby Pascuzzi. It's an interesting career path to go down, but it can also lead to a lot of, like, existential dread over what you're doing, and like, why am I even doing this research? There's almost too much freedom in the job at times. Like, oh my god, what am I doing? And so like, there are times where I'm looking at, like, these other people doing all this cool stuff. I'm like, oh my god, I'll never be like that. So I would tell myself, like, no, just you give yourself credit. You're working towards it. Don't compare yourself to these other people. You'll do fine.
Yeah. Great advice from Dr. Christian Hubicki. Christian, are there anything else? Is there anything else you want to touch on here tonight?
I think we touched on quite a bit tonight. I mean, I did
Yes.
see like I did see just a quick touch, and I did see one of the I think Dolores, I think from one of the chat asked if these robots could be in hospitals. I think it was Dolores, and like that, and
Yes.
that is another one of the things that they're interested in. There's robots, one, getting around in hospitals. I mean, think about the pandemic. Like there are things that we needed people to do, but we literally couldn't be around each other for a long
Hmm.
time. Like that was too dangerous. Like what if you robots at the pandemic? And also you mentioned robot surgeries. Robots are doing surgeries today. They're not walking robots, but they are. But like they're ways that you can have a robot more thoughtfully guide in instruments in the surgery, so that way you could have minimally invasive surgery, so you can do much smaller holes and cuts in people to be able to do that. So I want to circle back to that question. There's medical applications to all these robots as well. But I think these questions in general have been great, and I think we've covered a variety of topics. Wouldn't you
Okay.
agree?
Great job by the question askers, and of course, incredible job by you, Christian. Are you watching anything fun these days? Or are you too busy with work?
Well, I finally caught Jury Duty, that Jury
Yes.
Duty
What'd you
show.
think of that?
I like the show. I like the show. It was a lot funnier than I expected.
Yes.
I'm normally not a prank comedy guy, but the improv for how they handled that was really fun. That was a.
Yes.
Did you watch that one,
Yes. Yeah.
Rob?
Podcasted it. Yeah. It was on Hit or
Oh,
Quit. Yeah.
oh man, so they did. That got nominated for Emmys too. That actually
Did it?
made the
Oh my
list for a couple.
god.
Yeah. So yeah, like I thought James Marsden was a funny character. The one thing I will say about that show, I'm glad that guy won money, but he seemed very clearly like confused and conflicted by the whole experience at the very end. It seemed like at least at the end of the show, he was like, What's happening?" And you're like,
Hmm.
"Oh, it's okay, you get money." So I felt a little conflicted at the end. Like this guy seems horribly confused, but seems
He
like
went
he's
through a
taking it
lot.
in stride.
Yeah.
Went through a lot
Yeah.
for that. That
Yeah.
was but it was a fun show. I'd recommend that one. It's a good, funny show.
Okay. Christian, is there anything you want to tell people to check out while you're here?
Well, so you can check out. I'm still on this website called Twitter.com. I'm not as at Chubicki, Chubicki. I occasionally post on there, and on Instagram at under the same handle,
Are you going to
Chubicki.
make the leap to Threads?
I am waiting to see where all the science communicators are going. I
Yes.
don't like to. I'm not an early adopter of social media stuff, Rob. So
Oh,
what
I
do you what's your
am.
feeling on Fred?
I
What's your feeling?
am, I when I see, a unhomed social media, I feel like I am much more adopt social media because, somebody's got to take care of it. So I have a big heart. So I'm always adopting more social media. And Nicole says, "Really? A new social media?" I'm like, it's brand new. Look at this. It's adorable.
The
Christian, do you
Angelina
have any?
Jolie of social media.
Yes, I am. I
Yes.
am.
Yeah.
But Christian, do you have any thoughts on like have you do you feel like you have a projection of what you think will happen with Twitter?
Oh, that's I think smarter people than me are trying to game that out right now. I mean, I mean, it is nice in general to see competition in any space. It felt like for a long time, like each of these like social media platforms sort of had their kings of their niche. Like you had your Instagram for people who are good at selfies and cool vacation photos. You had Twitter for people who were snarky or witty in a couple of sentences,
Mhm.
and Facebook for just general giant networks of people talking about stuff, and YouTube for videos. Which like that's the way it felt to me. And it makes it easy when there's only one website to go to, but it is nice to have competition. So
Mhm.
we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Christian, thank you for coming on and spending some time with us once again for another edition of Ask Dr. Hubicki. The chat seemed to really enjoy it. And so I hope that the podcast listeners enjoyed it as well. And so thank you so much for checking this out. We have a lot more coming up here on Rob Has a Podcast. We're covering Claim to Fame, Christian. Have you seen season 1 or 2 of Claim to Fame?
I have not, but I know that one Emily in my household is a diehard listener to your podcast on the
Yeah, I
subject.
think you'd really like it. I think that you should check it out. So that's a fun one. And then we also had a special interview with Phil Kogan earlier today, host and executive producer, creator of Tough as Nails, a show where they do not want to see a bunch of robots showing up in the factory. Tell you that right now.
I can tell you that. Well, I mean, so when is that coming on? Is that coming out at the summer show or is that going to be the
Oh,
fall?
that's we are 3 weeks into our 5 week run of Tough as Nails.
Oh, oh wow! So it's already going. So yeah, I guess now with it's gonna be this is gonna be. I salute you, Rob, for the upcoming
Thank you. Thank you.
go
We
for
have
like
the gauntlet is coming. So we'll be on the lookout for that. All right. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Take care. Have a good one.